Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show, and I'm glad that you can be here with me wherever you are on this planet, flying through the cosmos at ridiculous speeds. The fact that you're under my voice, you have my deepest appreciation that you are under this voice, because as I often say, you could be anywhere, but you just so happen to find yourself right here. And I appreciate you being right here. I'm not going to be a geopolitical chauvinist. So I'm going to say morning or evening, depending upon where you are in the world. But either way, thank you for joining me. You're deeply appreciated. I deeply appreciate it. I have to start with this. Laith Marouf, who is a really good friend of the show, is missing. He has been abducted, detained. Choose your adjective. But for all intents and purposes, for right now, it is unclear where Laith is. Laith was picked up when they were doing a journalistic item, because he's a journalist, and he was apparently apprehended or taken into custody by the Lebanese military. The gentleman that was with him, Hadi, I think this is Hotait, will be on the show later today to explain what happened. But he did write a piece on Twitter explaining what happened. I'm just going to read that piece since it will be easier for me to read it as opposed to just interpret. Yesterday, while I was heading to a report on the ongoing Israeli incursion into southern Lebanon area or southern border areas, a friend and colleague, Laith Marouf, journalist, media law consultant, and founder of Free Palestine TV, was with me in the car. We were stopped by the Lebanese army at a routine checkpoint. After a respectful professional exchange, during which we presented our official permits and documents, I was allowed to continue. However, Laith, being a non-Lebanese national, was escorted to Sedai, I guess this is Seda, to complete a missing document in his file. Since around 1 a.m. yesterday, I have lost contact with him. I'm sharing this publicly for the record to explain Laith's sudden absence to his followers and colleagues, especially those expecting regular communications or weekly episodes. Laith is a tireless media activist, advocate for justice, committed to the cause of peoples of Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, and the broader region. He stands firmly against imperialism, neocolonialism, in all its forms. He deserves to be treated with dignity due to someone who has dedicated his life to struggle for truth and liberation. I will continue to share any updates I receive regarding his whereabouts and his situation. So obviously, this is disconcerting. This is disconcerting. Having someone disappeared, it's disconcerting. I don't know another word for it. For all intents and purposes, Laith was out doing journalistic activities, something that he does all the time. And if you ever watch his Free Palestine TV, let's say links, ads, those type of things. And not ads, they're links, they're videos. You could see him, in some cases, risking his own life to do this stuff. When he's being shot at by the Israelis, for example, that's him risking his life to go out and get that footage, to get those interviews. And so it's a bit disconcerting that he gets picked up by the Lebanese army and then goes missing at 1 a.m. And we are into this, 24 hours? It's been more than 24 hours at this point, and we still don't know where Laith is. I sent him a text message. I haven't received a response. Heidi will be on the show at 10 o'clock to kind of give a rundown of what he knows up to this point. He was concerned that he himself was going to be picked up and arrested or detained, again, whatever word you want to use for it. He said he got word that he is not going to be detained, which is good. By the same token, we still don't know where Laith is. So I wanted to start the show off with that. Laith, as I said, has been a really good friend of the show. And he's been very cool to me. Yeah, he's been really cool to me. I mean, he didn't have to come on to the show. And at one point, he even invited me to go on a trip with him to cover a news event taking place in Iran. I wasn't able to go on that trip just because of the schedule. But again, he's always been cool to me. He's always been good. And he does a damn good job in his explanations. Whether you agree with him or not is secondary to the point that he's a journalist that is once again being detained. And we are at this weird point in societies across the world where being a journalist is no longer a defense to being either apprehended by authorities, being shot and murdered, like what Israel has been doing with those journalists that they've been killing outright. It is no longer a defense. That is a sad place to be. And yet that seems to be the place where we're at. So I don't know where Laith is. I assume he's with the Lebanese military. And hopefully he's safe. And hopefully this is a documentation issue as opposed to the issue of his reporting. So when I know more, you'll know more. When I know more, you will know more. So there's that. All right. I have a damn good show for you today. A packed show, no less. Caleb Maupin is going to be here. Tim Anderson is going to be here first, coming on at 7:15. Caleb Maupin will be on at 8 o'clock. We're going to have Ted Rall coming on at 8:45. We have a conversation about AOC. AOC is doubling down, effectively saying, hey, man, you guys are saying that I voted for something that I didn't vote for. It's like, dude, that's kind of the issue. You didn't vote for it. Whether you vote for something or not vote for something, it is still a vote. It is still going into the record book as a yay or nay about some kind of provision. In the case of the amendment that we're talking about, it was Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to extract $500 million going to Israel. AOC puts out a post claiming, well, this doesn't do anything about the weapons that they're getting, so I'm not going to vote for it. I don't want more deaths, and so I need Israel to be able to protect itself. This is the argument that she's effectively making. A country that is committing a genocide, and her argument is that country that's committing a genocide needs to be able to defend itself. Okay, that's pretty astonishing. That's pretty astonishing. Why would I want or even care about a country committing a genocide being able to defend itself to continue to commit a genocide? That's pretty outrageous. That is the argument, however, that AOC is making, and she is feeling some kind of way that people are giving her hell about it, because people have been going at her saying, this position makes no sense. This position makes no sense. Imagine you being around in the Second World War, and you have elements of the United States sending Nazis money, and the argument is, well, we're just trying to help the Nazis to defend themselves. Is that satisfying to you? Like, is that really something where you think to yourself, hey, I was against that genocide, but since you're just, giving money to defend yourself as you commit the genocide, then that's okay. That makes no sense. It's a trash argument. It makes no sense at all. And so the people who are giving her shit about it are giving her shit about it because it makes no sense. And so she comes out with a post doubling down on her position, effectively arguing like, look, right here. She said, Google is free. Yeah, more or less. I mean, okay, fair enough. Google is free. If you're saying I voted for military funding, you're lying. Receipts attached. Drag me for the position all you want. But lying about them doesn't make you part of the, quote, left. Oh, because you are part of the left, backing a genocide. That's what you're telling us. If you believe neo-Nazis are welcome and operating in good faith, you can have them. Okay, that's pretty astonishing, because Rashida Tlaib voted for it. So what, she's a Nazi? Is that what you're telling me? Rashida Tlaib is a Nazi? Ilhan Omar. So she's a Nazi too? She's trying to make this argument that because Marjorie Taylor Greene was the one that did it and made the bill saying, hey, we need to extract money from Israel because, they're committing a genocide, and why are we sending these people money? That this, in and of itself, that it is inherent that there's something wrong with Marjorie Taylor Greene doing it, or there's something inherently wrong with the bill because Marjorie Taylor Greene was the one that did it. She's out of her mind. This is doubling down on, not just on stupid, on evil. It is demonic in its very basis of an argument to make that we need to be able to defend people who are committing a genocide. And when you point out that, well, AOC is voting to send money because a no vote in this is to extract money. So a yes vote, or I'm saying this backwards, effectively saying no to this amendment is saying, I want to send Israel $500 million more. That's what you're saying. That's your argument. That's the argument that you're making by voting no on this particular bill, because the bill was going to extract money that was going to be sent to Israel. So for people to say, well, you're sending Israel money, then that is what you're doing, considering you're not subtracting the money that Marjorie Taylor Greene wanted to subtract from the money that Israel was being sent. So as Malik would say, she's being too cute by half on this. It didn't act like Marjorie Taylor Greene is a neo-Nazi. Is that what you're arguing? When you're the one that's supporting the Nazis by sending them additional money? Oh, that's outrageous. That's outrageous. This lunatic is calling herself a lefty. This lunatic is calling herself a lefty and then invokes the left as if she is on the left in a position where she is effectively supporting a genocide. Get out of here. Just get out of here with that. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. You can disagree with the bulk of what somebody does, and they can still do something right. I thought Donald Trump was atrocious. By the same token, when he put a knife in that amendment, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I thought it was a good thing. You could do that. That's called being a person. That's called saying, hey, I agree with this, but I disagree with that. You can do that as a human being. But apparently AOC has no capability of doing that. Zero, none. And calling Marjorie Taylor Greene a neo-Nazi as she backs Nazis. That is astonishing. I could show you video after video of Israel murdering people. I could show you them blowing up Hodaya port in Yemen. And you could say, well, Yemen is attacking ships. Fair enough, Yemen is attacking ships. But when you're blowing up the port with the notion of trying to kill as many people as you can possibly kill, okay, well, that's a little bit different. Yemen is being very specific in what they're going after. Israel is being indiscriminate in the people that they're killing. And whether you're talking about Syria, whether you're talking about Lebanon, whether you're talking about Gaza, whether you're talking about the West Bank, whether you're talking about the attacks that took place on Iran, where they were, again, trying to have a decapitation strike, why do you believe that people like this, monsters like this, deserve U.S. money, taxpayer money? And whether it's for offense or defense, why do you believe that they deserve any defense at all? Why? They're committing a genocide. Why? Why do you believe that Nazis need to be somehow defended with U.S. taxpayer money? It is confusing to me. I don't get it. And yet, that is the argument that AOC is making. And then casting shade on Marjorie Taylor Greene, who in this case is doing God's work. She is. She's doing God's work. Whatever other issues you have with Marjorie Taylor Greene is secondary to the point that she's trying to extract money from a genocidal regime. A regime that is murdering kids, murdering babies, starving millions to death. I can show you videos of people dying on their feet of starvation. And AOC is like, we need to protect that genocidal regime. That's what we need to do. We need to protect that regime. Just trash, complete and utter trash. I want to bring in my guests. I am joined with the man himself, Tim Anderson. Tim Anderson is a writer, internationalist, academic, and director of the Center for Counter-Hegemonic Studies. Tim, thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate your the commentary, our conversations. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you as well.
Well, I know it's nighttime for you. It's nighttime for me. For the people on the East Coast, it's morning for them. I'm not going to keep you because I know it is late. But I am curious on, I guess, two fronts. The first, let's go to Iran first. Let's do Iran first. So, I think it's pronounced Arachi, has been doing interviews. He's on the press circuit. And as he's on the press circuit, he's having a conversation with Brett Baer. But he's also talking about enrichment. And he's taking a strong stance saying, look, we're going to continue enrichment. It may be down now, but we're going to get back to it. But then when asked about talks with the United States or the European Union, he is going to have talks with the European Union on enrichment. And I say to myself, why? These people, as you were being bombed and as your people were being murdered by Israel in an unprovoked attack, with the United States having full knowledge of it, the European Union backed the attack. They didn't say this is outrageous that Israel is doing this. Their response was the opposite of that. And so it's like, okay, so why are you having this conversation with the European Union in this case? And then for the United States, when asked about, hey, are you going to have talks with the US? They said, we're not planning on having direct talks. Okay, so you're open to having indirect talks. And they said, well, we're open to indirect talks if Donald Trump says he's not going to attack us. What am I missing here? Like, maybe it's me being an American. The notion that I'm going to talk to these people after they were backing the killing of my own seems outrageous. But maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, no, you're right to look at those tensions. I mean, of course, the reason why the Europeans and the government of my country too say what they say about that sneak attack on the Friday the 13th of June is because Israel is such a forward base for the US and for the idea of US influence in the whole region, in the whole West Asian region, basically. So they'll contemplate anything. I mean, they're all supporting to one degree or another the genocide in Gaza, you know. So what's to be said about bombing Syria or bombing Iraq or bombing Iran, you know? From Iranian point of view, which I think you started, piqued your interest, basically, there are some differences within Iran about how they approach this. But, you know, from my point of view, I agree with you, you know, that what's in it for Iran, any of these nuclear talks, really? They want to have a nuclear power industry. They want to use it for research, and that includes medicine and so on. There's a number of things that nuclear research and nuclear industry is geared towards, basically. And the Iranians have made it very clear that that's what they want it for. They don't want nuclear weapons. If there's been some discussion more recently about weapons only because they're being threatened incessantly, you know, for decades, effectively, about it. But that's coming from people who are very frustrated and think maybe they'll back off if we have a nuclear weapon. But the problem is they've been telling us all for decades how immoral it is to have nuclear weapons because they're so indiscriminate. Who's going to believe that Iran is going to use it, basically, even if they had one, basically? I suppose there's still an argument that you could say, well, they could retaliate with one if they were attacked with one. But, you know, that's another story. Look, I think the whole idea of talks, and they're indirect talks because let's remember the US and Iran don't have diplomatic relations. The Iranians closed the embassy down in 1979. If you go to Iran, you can see it. It's a museum now, the nest of spies. And next door to it is the Imad Mughniya training school for young revolutionaries. Basically, that was the ambassador's residence, you know. So there is no direct diplomatic relations. That's why they have these indirect talks, basically. So the last ones were in Oman, I think in Muscat, which is a nice quiet part of the just outside the Persian Gulf there. But they're indirect talks, and why do the Iranians have the talks at all? Because they're not going to contemplate the idea of totally shutting down their industry, which is what the Trump regime was asking of them. And they said, no, they're not going to do that. What are they talking about? I think that we have to recognize that some things are done mainly for diplomatic reasons, that people don't want to seem to be unreasonable. They want to be seen to be open, to be talking, to discussing things if the other side has a genuine interest. In my view, it's always been an attempt at unilateral disarmament of the Iranians, because the other side has been trying to add conditions about their missile program. Initially, it was about a missile program which could be nuclear capable and so on. Now they're worried, obviously, because clearly Iran has some very powerful targeted weapons, which are not weapons of mass destruction. They're able to target you know, their military and infrastructure objectives very precisely, as we saw last month when they knocked out the Haifa refinery and a number of other places. We didn't see it all because the Israelis, of course, have military sensors on all the things that people can show, basically. But they've recognized, I think, the latest concession by the Israelis was, they said in the second half of that 12-day war, they blocked, they weren't able, 16% of the Iranian missiles got through. That's what the Israelis will admit. So at least 16% of those missiles got through. So it's a very effective arsenal that the Iranians have, and they have it buried all around the country. It can't be destroyed in one strike, or if at all, basically. So there's often been talk ever since 2015 of trying to extend the so-called nuclear agreement to cover other things. And the aim, of course, is to try and disempower Iran as a force in the region, you know, as a force supporting the Palestinian resistance, supporting Hezbollah, supporting Yemen, supporting, when there was an independent Syria, supporting Syria and supporting the resistance in Iraq, which is still important but constrained by the occupation there. So from the Iranian point of view, I think they're doing it mainly for diplomatic reasons, to show that they're reasonable people. This is their style of diplomacy. After all, even when they carry out war, they do it very politely. You know, when they struck the US base in Al Udeida base in Qatar, they gave Qatar many hours advance notice. All of the airspace was shut down. Basically, I remember seeing, you know, hours before that strike. We don't know exactly what happened there, except we know that one radar installation was destroyed. We don't know what else happened because of the censorship from the US side there. But they gave them a lot of advance warning when they were firing missiles at the Israelis. I was actually traveling through the Persian Gulf at that time, and certain flights were shut down, but traffic was still going on because the Iranians were, you know, civilized enough to let the airlines know what was going on and what time of the day it was going on, basically. So they, I think, are having these indirect talks with the US mainly to show that they're reasonable and to keep the high moral ground, because after all, it was Trump that tore up that agreement in 2015. They reached some sort of agreement with Obama back there. Obama didn't respect it entirely anyway. It was never respected, so the Iranians gradually rolled it back. But I think the Iranians felt we can hold the high moral ground here. We committed to an agreement. We maintained it as long as we were able to, and the other side tore it up. So why shouldn't we keep having these indirect talks? And at one stage, they're having them in Europe, you know, and they're trying to persuade the Europeans, I suppose, to stick to their view of resuming normal economic relations with Iran. They never did, because the Europeans haven't got the spine to stand up to Washington, basically. So, but nevertheless, I think it's mainly a diplomatic effort there, because there's nothing in it for Iran except for the lifting of sanctions. And now we've got the Europeans to some extent, and the US to a greater extent, imposing other sanctions for all sorts of other reasons on Iran.
Yes.
You know, so what's left in it there for Iran other than diplomacy, basically?
I guess that's kind of my point. I think the moral high ground is overrated. I mean, Israel is literally committing a genocide. They don't care about the moral high ground. The United States backs them in that genocide and pays for a large share of it. We don't care about the moral high ground. Europe stood by while they were being attacked and cheered on the fact that they were being attacked. They didn't care about the moral high ground. Why should Iran? And just to be very clear what I mean by this, I don't mean that Iran should go indiscriminate killing people. That's not what I mean. I just mean they were in negotiations. They were attacked unprovoked in the middle of those negotiations. And apparently the US had told them that they weren't going to be attacked while they were negotiating. So there is no impetus for them to have these talks. There's nothing, as you point out, to gain from those talks, whether it's with Europe or the United States, especially if what they're talking about is, well, we want zero enrichment. Whether you're talking to the Europeans or whether you're talking to Americans, if they're saying the same thing, what is the point of those talks when that's not what you're ever going to do anyway? I don't know. Iran annoys me a lot with this, because to me it's like, dude, why are you doing that?
Once upon a time in Iran, back in 2015, the Rouhani administration, there was almost a bit of a cult amongst the liberal faction of politics in Iran, you know, and now there's a president who's of the liberal faction, but said by some to be a moderate liberal. In other words, sort of in the center of things. That they call it principalists and reformers, or liberals, basically. A lot of the liberals really believed in this idea of re-engaging with the West, and it was going to be all fine and dandy. You know, there was going to be open commercial relations, and indeed a large section of the Iranian middle class still likes the idea to a certain degree of a more liberal economic relationship. They think there'll be some economic benefits in it. I think what happened with the sneak attack, as you pointed out, sneak on the part of the US as well as the Israelis of last month, is that it managed to unify the factions in Iran. It unified them all, saying these people have committed this unprovoked aggression on us, and we're going to respond, basically. Still, the response to the Israelis, of course, was much more powerful than anything we've seen before. It was restrained with the US. They didn't go and kill servicemen. They hit some facilities, so far as we know. We don't really know exactly, because remember when they struck the base in Iraq back in 2000, after Mr. Trump had assassinated General Soleimani and Mohandas, and two of the great heroes of anti-terrorism in that region. There was a strike, but it was still restrained on Al-Ain Air Force, Ain al-Assad Air Force Base in Iraq. I think initially they said there was no casualties. Later on, they said there was concussion injuries or brain injuries, or traumatic brain injuries, something like that. So we don't really know what happened at Al Udeid Air Force Base last month, but except it was restrained. It was clearly a restrained attack. The Iranians are concerned generally about escalation. They don't want escalation. They've been preparing for a war with the US, but they prefer not to have that. They'd rather have respond to the Israelis and separate them out. The problem is, of course, that large sections of the US body politic regard Israel as a forward base of the US, basically. I know within the US there's this debate that Israel is controlling the US, or why are we sacrificing our own interests for the sake of the Israelis? But another way to look at it is that it's a forward base of the US, and therefore, if there's an existential threat to the Israeli entity, it's likely that the US is going to intervene to a greater extent, basically. I think the intervention by Trump last month was really just to call a pause because the Israelis were running out of their expensive weapons and expensive missiles that are fired as air defense, and they're stocking up now, ready for the second round, basically. But that attack by Trump certainly was a sneaky, unprovoked thing, but it was to give the Israelis a chance to breathe, really, because I think that there's still this wariness about, if the attack escalates against Israel, Israel can be wiped out effectively. All of its functional mechanisms in terms of military and infrastructure can be wiped out. You know, they're offshoring their jet planes now on the British military base in Cyprus. You know, so they everyone knows that their air defense is not as great as they made it out to be, basically. But nevertheless, they're relying on a lot of foreign support from the Germans, from the British, from the North Americans, from a number of the allies of the US in the region, from the Saudis, from Jordan, and so on, to protect their regime. And if there is an existential crisis, and Iran and its allies could bring that about, if they really want to wipe out this apartheid regime, which is the mother of the genocide and the war crimes, of course. You know, that's the problem is around the world, even amongst the big counterweights in the world like Russia and China, they're still saying, oh, well, two-state solution. But what does that mean? Recognizing an apartheid regime, which is the mother of these crimes, basically. Yeah. At the moment, Iran, or the government of Iran, let's say, is relying on a self-defense rationale. And that means the initiative is still with the Israelis. It means they're going to defend themselves if they're attacked again. It's very likely they're going to be attacked again, basically. They're getting ready for that. They've repaired, they say, their air defenses and so on. But it means they're on the back foot still, really. And Israel has the, if not the upper hand, at least it's going to make the first move, I believe, in terms of a second round of fighting.
It just seems like this plan of nuclear enrichment is the worst of both worlds. In one sense, 2 points on that. One, when Iran is always talking about this, they're talking about this almost like it's an issue of sovereignty, full stop, right? Like, I don't have to justify something that I'm doing in my own country, full stop. It's like the US doesn't justify building nuclear weapons. So don't come to me and ask me to justify me doing something similar. And they're not even building nukes. Even though there are many of us, like myself, who say they should build the nuke. They should have built that nuke already at this point. Would Israel have attacked if indeed they had nukes? That's a good question. But that's not the direction they go with it. They say we're just building up to 60%, and we're using this for various research purposes. It just seems like the worst of both worlds. Do you think Israel would have attacked Iran if they had a nuke?
It's hard to say, because I think if you look at, people make the comparison with North Korea and they say, well, look at North Korea, right. And there was a big threat against them in 2017, which was resolved with some diplomacy the following year. But I think with North Korea, you have to bear in mind they have a different style of diplomacy to the Iranians too. States carry out their resistance in different ways. The North Koreans' view of diplomacy is, don't mess with us, we're crazy, we'll do anything, basically. And people believe, I don't think it's true, actually, by the way. They're much more, when you talk to them, they're much more reasonable people, But right. They have that image, don't they? They have that image. They say, well, these guys have got a nuclear weapon and they're mad, and so we better not, poke them or upset them, basically. Whereas the Iranians have been telling us for 40 years nuclear weapons are immoral, they're forbidden to have this type of warfare, that's going to necessarily incinerate hundreds of thousands of, basically. So their style of diplomacy, it's not just the possession of a nuclear weapon, it's the style of diplomacy goes with it, basically. And so the Iranians have relied on putting out their values in their diplomacy, basically. And I'm not sure that the Iranians would be that credible. It may be that it would be a deterrent in terms of if the Israelis thought, well, they can't respond, they won't respond if we attack their nuclear. By the way, apparently their nuclear facilities, the one that was buried very deep, was too deep even for most nuclear blasts to get to, basically. The nuclear could perhaps penetrate 500 meters, but not, is it 500 meters? Or anyway, it can't get to the depth in which those facilities are in. So maybe there was some deterrence in having one, in that the other side would think that they might respond with one if they were attacked with one. Certainly, according to their diplomacy, that they're not going to be thought to carry out a first strike. In fact, the only state in the world that has actually not renounced first strike ability is the US, basically. And the world knows that they've used them, and they've used them against civilian cities too, because Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not military targets. It was a demonstration for the beginning of the Cold War against the Soviet Union at the time, and they used it on civilian cities.
But it makes no sense as a military plan. I mean, they're going to get pecked to death. And under this model, every time Israel's about to lose, or every time Israel takes, too much damage, the US can step in, attack, in which case you pause it again. And this repeating process of attack and pause, attack and pause. With Israel, always have the distribution of force, because ultimately they always have nuclear weapons. This doesn't seem like a winning strategy to me. And maybe I'm getting this wrong, but give me your take on this.
You mean from the Iranian point of view?
Yeah, from the Iranian point of view. Because imagine for the moment that this happens again, Israel attacks, which it will at some point. And then if it gets to the point where it seems like Israel is once again losing, the US comes in order to effectively say stop, in which case you get another pause, giving Israel time to reload and attack once again. I'm saying this doesn't seem like a winning strategy, especially since at the end of the day, Israel has nukes. Iran knows Israel has nukes. And so Iran is always measured in the way that it's going to go after Israel in its response.
Partly for that reason, and partly because they see the escalation with the US. Yeah, that's what they're preparing for, basically. But look, there's a genuine tension, I believe, in Iran. I'm of the opinion myself that there is no end to this constant cancer, as they call it, in the region. It's the Iranians have called this a cancer.
Yes.
Israel, that really they've attacked every independent regime in the region, basically. There's a couple like Egypt and Jordan that have made their own peace agreements, but basically the Israelis have invaded Lebanon multiple times. They're invading Syria again. They're trying to annex more of Syria. We know that they want more and more of the territory in the region. They're doing it step by step. The Iranian leader has said, Khamenei has said that if you give in to them on the nuclear enrichment, they'll come for the missiles. They'll come for other things after that. There's no end to it, basically. But at this stage, the Iranian government is relying on its Article 51 of the UN Charter right to self-defense. They haven't moved to a rationale which says that, first of all, and the Yemenis have, by the way, Yemenis say we have obligations under the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide to intervene on behalf of the Palestinian people directly, not asking for anyone's permissions. Yemenis have done that already. There is also a very good argument that the fight with the Israelis should be to dismantle the apartheid regime, because that's the root of most of the crimes going on, and there's no end to it until that regime is dismantled. But at the moment, that's not the basis on which the Iranians are fighting, are responding to the Israelis. I think there's a very good argument to be made that this is, after all, apartheid is a crime against humanity. That's UN resolutions on that. And there's a responsibility on the international community to dismantle an apartheid regime for that reason. And you can't keep mouthing this pretext of a two-state solution, which implies recognizing the apartheid regime, which is committing genocide against its neighbors or its inhabitants, if there's already a single state in historic Palestine, basically. But at this stage, there isn't, that rationale is not being put out openly. And this is, I suppose, also the question of, would the Israelis be mad enough to respond if they fear that the regime is going to collapse with nuclear weapons? And to what extent would the US intervene in support, and would the US use nuclear weapons in those circumstances too? Because I think we've seen from Russia that the Russians have said that they've forsworn a first use of nuclear weapons, but they have added a proviso now to say if there's an existential threat to the state, they might consider it. And that's the problem with the Israelis now. They haven't signed any non-proliferation treaty. They haven't. They refuse to confirm or deny their possession of nuclear weapons, and it's uncertain to what extent or in what circumstances they might use them. So there we're stuck with a dilemma that you mentioned. The Iranians are, in a conservative mindset, are continue to use the self-defense rationale, but there's an argument to be made in the region, it's being made by some people in the region, like in Yemen, that there is a greater mandate to put an end to this regime, basically, which is causing so much grief to all the people in the region.
I want to pivot to Syria for a bit. I've been getting various opinions on what is taking place on the ground in Syria. You mentioned that Israel is taking more territory as we speak. This was a speech by al-Jilani, or al-Shara, as he is calling himself at this point. And he effectively is saying, I want to thank the Bedouins for beheading. He's not using the term beheading, I'm using the term beheading. There we are. I want to thank you for beheading the Druze. I want to thank you for killing them because they were attacking other people in the area. So thanks for that. I'm being facetious, but I'm not being facetious. I mean, the speech is effectively a thank you. What is going on in this case? I mean, this is so contradictory to me. This is so weird. You would have people who are out there holding a knife, arguing or screaming, we're going after the Druze because they work with the Israelis. And it's like, dude, the guy you're doing that for is trying to work with the Israelis. What are you talking about? It makes no sense to me. And yet, that's what's taking place.
Look, this is an extension of the dirty war against Syria for the last 14 years, effectively. For many, many years, they were saying that this is, there is some sort of natural sectarian differences which are behind what's called, still if you look at Wikipedia, a civil war. It was never really fully a civil war. There were Syrian elements, Muslim Brotherhood elements, which were involved in this, but nevertheless, it was driven by the big powers. Even today, there are still the two biggest militaries in NATO. Turkey and the US are still occupying Syria. The Israelis are the third occupying force there. Now, the story that a lot of the Western media, or as I call the colonial media, because they support any intervention on any rationale, basically, the story they're putting out is that there's some sort of internecine disputes between the Druze and the Bedouin and the state in Syria, pretending that there is a state in Syria. In my view, there's no real state in Syria. The state is intervening to try and settle things. And then the Israelis got involved because that story wasn't totally credible, because they wanted to present themselves as protectors of the Druze, and as to build a rationale for occupying more of South Syria, basically. Already they colonized the Druze in the Syrian Jolan for many, many decades, basically, and they want to try and extend that. They have some Druze collaborators in occupied Palestine to help them with that. And there's indeed a real dilemma for the Druze people, who are quite strong and quite organized, but they're quite small and quite isolated also. But if they're faced with the question of being massacred by these Al-Qaeda groups, which have been doing it, by the way, for many, many years, there were big massacres of Druze people in Idlib, in Hama, in other parts of Syria during the long proxy war. If it's a choice between that and Israeli protection, many of the Druze people are thinking, well, maybe we'll be colonized. We don't want to be colonized. They're very fiercely independent people. They prefer autonomy. They were happy they could deal with the pluralism when there was a pluralist state in Syria, the Assad government, which is looking better and better as the crimes of the Jolani regime keep going on. But they could survive with and accept a pluralist state, but they can't accept these sectarian attacks, basically. And they now, in the current circumstances, they've actually effectively defended themselves. But the Jolani regime was organizing these groups to the extent that there were Arab tribes and Bedouin people involved. They were organized and paid by the Jolani regime, which is financed by Qatar and by Turkey, basically. So this was an attack by the regime in Damascus. It's not a real state. They weren't protecting anyone. They weren't mediating between two warring groups. It was them. Most of the atrocities that you've seen, there's a lot of video evidence now, involves non-Bedouin people also carrying out massacres, and they also perpetrated some false flags, which there's a great history of in Syria going back to 2011, where, for example, they beheaded some Druze people and then pretended this was a Bedouin person that had been beheaded. So there's a lot of misleading propaganda going on still to try and maintain the credibility of the Jolani regime as a state. And I think because the NATO states, the Britain and Germany and France and the US have supported the rise to power of this Al-Qaeda group, they're trying to soften its image, even though the Israelis have sort of clearly intervened because there was a widespread perception that the Druze were indeed being attacked. And for now, they've got some sort of ceasefire because the US managed to get the Israelis to pull back from attacking the Jolani regime. They carried out some bombing on Damascus on some of the convoys, but that's settled for now. And the Druze are saying, well, okay, we've resisted them. We've successfully resisted them in these circumstances, but their future is very uncertain because it's the Jolani regime. Remember the first massacres they committed against minorities, and they hate the minorities. They really hate the minorities because they see them, the Alawis, the Christians, the Druze, some of the other smaller minorities, as being a rationale for the previous regime. Basically, the Ba'athist regime was quite overtly pluralist, and inclusive. It was very bad manners to call anyone in Syria to ask people what their religion was or what their sect was in Syria, because from Hafez al-Assad there was this ideology that we were all Syrians. Although the community divisions existed, everyone knew about them. They would ask where you came from rather than are you Druze, or are you Alawi or whatever. But anyway, the Jolani regime started with the Alawis. There was a bit of resistance on the coast, and they poured their forces in, massacred thousands of people on the coast there. Then just last month also, there was a suicide bombing on a Christian church in southeast Damascus, and there were attacks on Druze people who also live in parts of southeast Damascus, around Jaramana and so on, and then on the road down south to Swaida, and now this more recent large-scale attack on Swaida, basically. But they haven't occupied Swaida, but the Druze people are really alarmed now, and there's been hundreds of deaths as a result of that. But the Western media is giving a very distorted view, saying this is some sort of sectarian battle going on between the Bedouins, between the Druze, and the Jolani regime is intervening to try and stabilize things. That's very misleading.
Yeah, you've nailed it. That's exactly the way they're trying to present it, with the Israelis coming in to protect the Druze. I mean, we saw, I think it was last week. Where's the video? Right here. Last week we saw this. And this was supposed to be indicative of the Israelis coming in to save the Druze community. And you think to yourself, okay, well, if it's really the government that's supposed to be protecting the Druze, then why is Israel bombing the governmental building? I mean, this is effectively the presidential palace and the defense ministry.
Yeah.
And that's astonishing. Just out the blue. I mean, what is Israel's role in this? Is the objective just to steal more territory in the south? Because one of the things that Israel told the Jolani government, don't go south of Damascus, move your troops. And Jolani moved his dogs back up north into Damascus. And you think to yourself, okay, well, if a foreign state can tell you to move your military, quote unquote, basically your band of terrorist dogs back to Damascus, then you don't have control of your state. And you have to think to yourself, what is HTS and these, 120 odd number of people, groups with different ideologies, what are they thinking when Israel can give edicts to supposedly the leader of the caliphate? It's a bit weird. Or am I getting this wrong?
No, it is weird also because of the misinformation. But the Israelis, of course, were a part of the occupation forces of Syria that managed to destroy an independent state. Whatever you thought of the Assad government, it was independent, it was pluralist, had air defense against the Israelis, it stopped the northern expansion of the Israeli colonial regime, basically. Now, the doors have been opened. Jolani didn't put up any resistance to the Israeli invasion or to them destroying the military bases. The Israelis clearly work very closely with the US, specifically with CENTCOM, that branch of the Pentagon that thinks it owns West Asia, basically. And they have the headquarters in Qatar, and the CENTCOM general, whatever his name is, comes down to Tel Aviv, and they plan things together. They plan the operations in Gaza together. The US military is very deeply involved in all of this. The Israelis wouldn't exist if the US military and the other partners like the Germans and the British weren't propping them up and sending them weapons and resources. And so the plan, the strategy is to destroy and what was called under the Bush regime, using creative chaos to create a new Middle East. And the Trump regime has been repeating this, really. It's picked up, and there's a great continuity with the Trump regime, whatever you think of his rhetoric, basically. They're talking about a new Middle East, and the idea was that you would destroy all of the independent states there. Remember General Wesley Clark saying that there was this ambition in the Pentagon back in the early part of this century to destroy 7 states in 5 years. That includes some North African states, and Iran was the last one on the list there, basically, but right. Libya, Iraq, and so on. The strategy is to destroy those independent agencies. Now, Syria was not actively engaged with the Israelis, but they were playing an important part by providing weapons to the Palestinian resistance and to the Hezbollah in Lebanon, basically. And that, the US in Washington, they were crowing about getting rid of that agency when effectively the Assad regime collapsed in December last year, basically. So in that vacuum, whatever outcome you have, whether there's some sort of coalition government put together, as you point out, there's no effective government there. Really, there's no effective state. Of course, they're hated on the coast, but they're trying to take over property. They're stealing property. They're doing their own version of ethnic cleansing on the coast. Now they've attacked the Druze. In Homs, they were carrying out attacks against minorities, and Aleppo too. A friend of mine in the north east part in Kamishli said that the Kurdish group, which is supported by the US, is still there. There isn't really any agreement between HTS and them. So various parts of Syria are not being controlled by Jolani. And in some respects, that was his job. His job was not to set up some sort of credible regime. His job was to destroy the Assad regime. And he's carried out his work there. And some people think, well, the US can get rid of him now there, But the question is, and I don't know the answer to this, would the US be happy? Would those that helped collapse the Syrian state be happy with a Libyan situation where there's ongoing conflict, internal conflict for years and years? Or do they want to try and intervene to recreate some sort of weak Syrian regime, perhaps federalized like Iraq, the Iraqi road, in other words, where they have a weak government still with a US occupation there, but recovering some political will, but very limited, very constrained by the US occupation there. It's not clear which way or whether Trump even has any idea of what to do there. But it's true that Jolani doesn't control Syria, basically, and he doesn't have a state which represents the Syrian people. And some of my friends, Palestinian resistance groups who used to be supported by the Syrian government, are now, they can't escape and they can't get any sort of support. They themselves have been tortured and imprisoned by the Jolani regime. And these are Sunni Muslims, of course, from Islamic Jihad and other groups that live in South Damascus there. They don't think there's any capacity for this Jolani to create any sort of stable nation state there, basically. Their existence is threatened too in Syria. There's of course, they also had, partly because they also had a good relationship with the Syrian army. The Syrian army, which was a genuinely inclusive agency, which fought HTS and ISIS and other terrorist groups in Syria for many, many years, which no longer exists there. But nevertheless, the Palestinian resistance groups could survive and could exist in Syria so long as there was a Syrian Arab army. Now that there isn't, they're under threat too. Anyone who collaborated with Assad or with the Syrian army is under threat in Syria, and they're putting their heads down to survive. Many people are surviving now. There's some sort of relative calm there, but it's a very precarious existence for anyone that actually collaborated with the Syrian army since 2011, at least.
I cannot imagine that situation. I mean, you had a government. There used to be photos and videos of women and men on the beaches in bikinis. And you think to yourself, that government gets turned into a caliphate where those people are going to be hunted, killed, if you even, consider something like that. And it happens overnight, like just overnight almost, where it just flips on a dime. A country that for 40, 50 years was an inclusive.
It was shocking because they'd resisted this war for 14 years, basically.
Yes.
And no one really expected that sudden collapse. That's a whole issue in itself. But you're right that many of the Syrians were very puzzled by the hostility, by US hostility, because the US is at the root of this war, basically. And they were puzzled by that hostility because a lot of the Muslims in Syria were the most westernized of all the Muslims, basically, and the Salafi Takfiri types from the Persian Gulf monarchies and so on. That way of thinking was very alien to the Syrians. So many of the Syrians thought that they felt culturally closer to the Europeans than the Persian Gulf Salafis and Takfiris, the vicious type, like the Ku Klux Klan of Islam, if you like, basically.
Yeah.
The Syrians felt puzzled by why there was so much hostility to them, because it wasn't really an overtly cultural hostility. It's just that this type of Islam, if you can call it that, the Al-Qaeda version, is something that existed historically, but it's been used by the hegemonic powers, by the British and then by the US, to divide and rule people, basically. And that's what they used. That's what they used in Syria, and they're still using it in Syria there. But it puzzles people who felt that they were culturally more pro-liberal or pro-European, basically, in Syria. And it's a terrible catastrophe for them, as you say, that their world's been turned upside down. Some are surviving okay. Those that don't belong to a minority sect or didn't have close relations with the military or with the Assad government there, but many people are living in fear at the moment, and of course the Druze are the latest victims of this.
Yeah. What about the Kurds? Are they really going to give up their weapons, considering what happened to the Alawites and what's happening to the Druze and what is going to happen to the Christians? Meaning they have to know that they're also in the firing line after watching this kind of mass murders and executions.
And there's been some fighting between HTS and the Kurdish group, which of course was hosted by the US, because it was another way that they could divide and rule Syria. They could cut off parts of the northeast, cut off the supply of oil to the government and steal the wheat and so on, send the oil through to Turkey, get it sent through to Israel in turn, because Turkey is really, for all its rhetoric, has been a very close commercial partner of the Israelis through all of this and through the genocide in Gaza. But that group now is facing an uncertain future. You're right, you point out that the PKK, which is the Turkish version of that, has come to some sort of agreement with the Erdogan government to put down their arms, basically. And they were the leadership of the separatist movements in Syria, because the Syrian Kurds were a relatively small group. In Turkey, there's a different historical basis to their separatism there, because the Kurds were doing quite well under the Ottoman Empire, but when Turkish nationalism replaced the Ottoman Empire, then their role and their language and so on was much more precarious. So you had this very long type of civil war in Turkey, which looked to get support from breakaway groups in North Iraq and North Syria, basically, and the political leadership of the PKK, the Workers' Party, which is the Kurdish, was the Kurdish Independence Party, has come to some deal now, which must have undermined the idea of having a stepping stone to an independent Kurdistan in Turkey, because the idea of a Rojava, of what's it called, southwest Kurdistan, it has disappeared, basically. But at the moment, there's some sort of standoff. I'm told that there isn't an agreement between what the Syrians call Qassad, or the SDF, in the northeast, and HTS. At the moment, that hasn't been worked out, because of course both of them have functioned as proxies for the US against the Assad government in the past, and they don't have an agreement as yet. But things are relatively calm in the northeast there. There's still a US occupation in the northeast there, and it's rather uncertain their future. But the idea of them being a stepping stone for an independent Kurdistan in Turkey seems to have gone too. There is in Iraq, of course, Iraq, which was federalized by the US occupation many years ago. There is a federal system now there with a Kurdish-controlled northern part there. Also occupied by Mossad, also uses a base against Iran there, because the US will use every surrounding group around Iran to try and harass and divide Iran. They'd like to do to Iran, of course, what they've been doing to Syria.
Wow. One last question on this front. Is the entire point, I got to be honest with you, I was somewhat shocked that they allowed a caliphate to be created in Syria at all. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is just a way for them to create chaos where Israel can take more territory. Is the entire point for them to commit this ethnic cleansing? Like, meaning the moment that you put somebody like Jelani in, you know exactly what Jelani is going to do. And the entire point of it is to destroy any notion of Syrian independence by going after the groups that would allow Syria to be independent.
Yeah, and there's some conflict now between Turkey, for example, and Israel about the control of Syria. And there's some uncertainty about what the Trump regime will do with its occupation forces there. But let's remember, go back to 2012, there was a DIA report back there when it was thought that, it was said that ISIS at the time, which was, a merger of the Iraqi and Syrian Al-Qaeda groups, basically, wanted to establish a caliphate in northeast Syria. And they tried for a while, and they occupied some large parts of east and northeast Syria. But the DIA report at that time, US intelligence, said, this is exactly what we want, basically, to weaken Damascus. They supported ISIS effectively. The Syrians, the Iraqis, the Iranians always said that the US was directly supporting ISIS at that time. The Iraqis complained that when they liberated Mosul, that was by the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq that were put together rapidly in 2014 because the Iraqi state was under deep threat at that time. They complained that the US never helped them. The US obstructed them, basically. And of course, the US indirectly assisted ISIS and directly assisted ISIS. I did one report on the direct engagement of the Australian and US Air Forces to support ISIS taking over the mountain behind the airport at Deir ez-Zor in 2016. So we know there's a long history of the US. I think also John Kerry, when he was an official, said they sat back and watched ISIS go across the desert to Palmyra in the center of Syria. In other words, they didn't intervene. So there's a lot of pointers to show that they were acting as ISIS was a proxy for the US to try and break up Syria, to break up an independent Syria and break that nexus between Iran and the Palestinian resistance and the Lebanese resistance, basically. And they succeeded in that effectively. And the resistance is now in Syria to that is there, but it's weak and it's divided, and people are intimidated. The Alawi population, for example, is particularly intimidated by those reprisals against the civilian population. Like the style of the Israelis in Gaza, they couldn't wipe out the resistance, but they tried to intimidate them by carrying out huge reprisals against civilians, exactly what every fascist regime has done in the past, hasn't it? If you can't actually get to the resistance, you carry reprisals against civilians and hoping that the civilian base will turn against the resistance and isolate them.
Tim Anderson, great breakdown, Tim. Honestly, fantastic breakdown. I knew you're the person to have this conversation with. You've been there many times. You've written the book on this stuff. You cover the stuff constantly. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. Tim Anderson, he is a writer, internationalist, academic, and director of the Center for Counter-Hegemonic Studies. Tim, by the way, where can people find you? Well, beyond counter-hegemonic studies.
They can find me on Twitter or X, basically, Timan2037. That's one of the easiest ways to find me, I think.
Okay. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay? Have a good night.
Thanks.
Alrighty. Yeah, Tim is fantastic. He's a great at breaking this stuff down. He knows his stuff on this. I want to go to another great guest. We're joined with the one and only Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin, he's a good friend of the show. He's also a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and author. Caleb, how you doing, my man? By the way, Center for Political Innovation.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, that's my organization, and
it popped into my mind all at once. Just one word: Center for Political Innovation.
Yeah,
I didn't even write it down.
Yeah, that's us.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing pretty well. Back from Chicago, we just had the CPI National Convention, and been looking over the news. And I mean, it's good to see that RussiaGate story go down in flames finally. I mean, you and I knew it was fake from the beginning, but it's good to see some confirmation of that. certainly worried about world events on a number of levels, but glad to be here with you, right?
Well, I'm glad to have you, man. I really am. I always enjoy talking to you. I think I've told you before. I think I've even said to the audience, I can listen to Caleb go on pretty much any issue for like your knowledge of that stuff is just so on point. I'm curious from your take, what is the one issue that seems to be concerning you the most on the world stage?
Well, I am obviously hugely disappointed in the White House. I was hoping that they meant what they said on the campaign trail. It's interesting. I think Lenin wrote about how elections can be a measure of popular will. And I think it's good that people voted for Trump when he promised peace. I think it's just, very disappointing that he didn't deliver, but we shouldn't be surprised really, because that's kind of the nature of the game, right? That at the end of the day, it's not about, who's in office. It's about the system that we're up against, and it's about the balance of forces. But that said, there's a number of things on my mind, one of which is the Trump-Musk break. Now, Elon Musk is somebody I'm not a huge fan of, but he has billions of dollars. He's supposedly the richest person in the world. Now, I don't, that whole thing about who's the richest person in the world, Forbes magazine comes out with that list. And I've always said that list is not legit, because the richest people in the world, you can't even measure their wealth, right? The Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Carnegies, the really wealthy families, they don't even know how much money they have. And, I think when one of the Rockefellers was trying to become vice president in the 1970s, they actually did a deep dive. The New York Times and all these big investigators tried to figure out just how much money he had, and they couldn't figure it out. It was so fast. So, they say Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. No, I'd say Elon Musk is so poor he has to keep his money in his own name. That's what it really gets down to. I don't think he's the richest man in the world. But that said, he's broken with Trump, and apparently part of the break is Trump bombing Iran, is support for Israel, is the Epstein list, and I'm getting together, Center for Political Innovation and us in the next few days. We're going to come out with a petition. We want Elon Musk to call a huge anti-war rally in Washington, D.C. That's what we want to do with all his billions of dollars, with his disappointment with the White House, and with his anti-war, anti-Israel stance. It appears he's more anti-Israel than we suspected. He needs to use his money, put his money where his mouth is, and gather thousands of people to have a big moment in Washington, D.C. against the drive toward war. That's what we want to make happen. And you're hearing it first, actually. I'm debuting it. I haven't talked to my audience about this yet. But that is going to be a big push that the Center for Political Innovation is going to have. We want Elon Musk to call a national anti-war protest.
I feel privileged. Thank you for that. He has so much money.
Yeah.
And like you said, like many of these other people, there's no way to know what that number is. And I would say it's not really an exact to the penny for Musk either, because a lot of the stuff is held in stocks and all these other things. But I have mixed feelings about billionaires being in the political space. People like George Soros, people like, what is the other guy? Like the way they would use their money in order to affect elections abroad in the United States is usually not to the good or to the better ends. It's usually just another way for them to maximize their profit. I mean, even Twitter, when he buys Twitter, he makes it seem like, and I guess I don't want to disagree with you on this, but I guess it makes it seem like, hey, I'm just doing this for free speech, until it's something that's going after Elon Musk, in which case he nixes whatever they're talking about. But I don't know, maybe you can get him, especially now that he's annoyed at Donald Trump, he's pissed off at Trump. For the Epstein thing, for example, he comes out and says, you need to release the files. Now, I agree with him on this, because we have a problem with the Epstein thing. If indeed Epstein is what people said he is, this Mossad spy that was basically feeding kids to adults to rape, and then using video footage or some kind of audio footage to blackmail, okay, then we have a serious problem with our government. And that needs to be shown that there is not a problem there, because by all measure of the way that the American public thinks, that information is there. We don't know how Epstein got his money. And I don't mean to go into Epstein on this. I'm just pointing out that when Musk put that out, okay, that's somewhat of a lightning rod. That's a big deal. Would he support an anti-war protest? Maybe, especially since it's against Donald Trump now, because Donald Trump has effectively betrayed his base. He might.
It's worth a try on our part, and
Yeah.
I think we need to just call for it and see if the call catches on, and see if we can nudge things towards happening. We did just have our national convention in Chicago. We gave
How'd
an
it go, by
award.
the way?
Oh, it went great. We gave an award to Angela McCurdle of the Libertarian Party for organizing Rage Against the War Machine. We gave an award to the Uhuru movement. They were able to send a representative, even though their organization is kind of in a state of emergency right now due to the tornadoes in Missouri that have just displaced all kinds of people, and they're in the middle of a big struggle. But Kabula represented them. He was the representative who was sent on their behalf. We had Sayed Husseini, a very important Iranian American, social media personality. He was there. We were able to, hear great remarks from him. It overall went pretty well, and I'm editing lots of video. I've got lots of video to edit in front of me, and I've been releasing one video a day. So keep your eye on that. Quite exciting over on my YouTube channel there. But what was great was we got to spend 7 days with the team, 7 days of, just being together. We got to visit the Haymarket Memorial at the Forest Home Cemetery in Chicago. That's where, it's a historic site in the history of, labor struggles and socialism and such. And we had a long Q&A session that's also going to go up online, where people asked a lot of questions and shared, what they're involved in. And it went really well. I feel pretty good about it.
That's very cool.
We're very excited. And now our next thing is going to be this big push to see if, hey, it's not a matter of Elon Musk being good or bad. It's the matter of him having billions of dollars, him having broken with the White House over an anti-war stance. I mean, we need to push the struggle forward, right? And if he would actually do that, right, which he very well might do, if he would actually do that, that would be a great thing. And I think the thing is that most people don't think in terms of protests, right? I know he wants to launch this America Party. There'll be a party that runs against the Democrats and Republicans in elections. Well, that's great. I'm not opposed to electoral activism, but ultimately, look, history is made by protests. And, I'm excited to start going through the King files that have just been released. Right. I know the files related to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. have just been made public. And so let's hope that we can find some more information about that. I mean, I know the King family has already won a settlement in court against the U.S. government for complicity in the killing. So, I mean, it's like the idea that the U.S. government had something to do with King's death is not something that we should be shocked to find out about it. And it's kind of old news. It just hasn't gotten mainstream play before. I used to work for Ramsey Clark, who was the U.S. Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson, and he very well believed. I mean, it was no secret as far as he was concerned that the FBI and others had a hand in the death of MLK. He saw that as just kind of obvious, and to a lot of activists it was obvious. At the time that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, Mao Zedong was the leader of China. He actually put out a statement on the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in that statement, he blamed the U.S. government for it. He said that the U.S. imperialists killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., spared him no mercy, even though he was an advocate of nonviolence. And so I don't think people around the world are shocked by the fact that the U.S. government may have been involved to some degree or other in the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What I do think would be good is if that was something that people in the United States were made blatantly aware of, because we have this holiday in honor of him. And when I was a kid, I learned that he gave a speech one time and he said, "I have a dream." And ever since then, there's been no racism ever again in American history, right? And it was all solved, and now we can all just move on. But it'd be good for people to learn the whole story there, including how he became an anti-imperialist in his final years of life, how he began saying the issue was a class struggle, right, and mobilizing, and how he was, I tell people Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot down on a picket line. I mean, he wasn't literally on a picket line in Memphis, Tennessee, but he went to Memphis to support a strike of sanitation workers who were striking for better pay and better conditions. And he was killed then in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting workers after he'd come out against the Vietnam War. So there's a lot there. And let's hope that those documents being released can start that conversation.
Didn't they pull his security detail after he came out against the Vietnam War? I mean, his argument made all the sense in the world. Effectively, the Great Society hit his head on the shores of Vietnam. How are we claiming to be this great society when we're over there killing people in a foreign country? That's when LBJ pulled this security detail. Or am I getting this wrong? Do I remember this wrong?
I'm not aware of that aspect of things. I mean, I know that he lost a lot of support when he came out against the Vietnam War. He was condemned by the NAACP for doing so, actually, an official condemnation. And he gave a speech at Riverside Church in New York City. That was where he officially came out against the war. And the speech he gave was called Beyond Vietnam. It's a very powerful speech. You can listen to recordings of it online. In that speech, he actually talks about how people all over the world are rising up against conditions of poverty, and that we in the West must support these revolutions it's a really powerful speech that's critical of capitalism, that basically, he was an advocate of nonviolence, but he basically says the Vietnamese are right to fight for their national liberation against U.S. imperialism, against French colonialism. Very, very powerful. And then, his last book that he wrote before he was killed, Where Do We Go From Here? Talked about full employment and how there should be universal employment, how the state should provide jobs to everyone, and how, mobilizing around the demand of full employment could be, the way forward. And he was working with Michael Harrington, who was eventually founded Democratic Socialists of America, who was kind of one of these, State Department socialists, and they were trying to do some kind of low-income people mobilization on Washington, D.C. They wanted to have mass civil disobedience demanding full employment. And in the context of the economic and political crisis of the 1960s, if he had been able to do that as someone who was opposing the Vietnam War and supporting the Vietnamese, as somebody who was trying to make the already, mass movement at the time against racism and against the Vietnam War a class movement, trying to get, working people involved, demanding full employment, who knows what could have happened. And I think, he was killed because at that point he was much more dangerous to the status quo at that point, And
that's the rub, right? Like he realized, it's one thing now, civil rights, but okay, I respect you as a man as you lay dying on the sidewalk, broke, poor, and hungry. It's like you can't have you need the economic liberation before you can get the civil liberation. Like both have to be in tandem. You can't have this kind of sea of poor people of a particular demographic and expect them to be treated as equals, and B, for them to see themselves as equals when they're living in dire poverty. I mean, he's not wrong in this. And I think the sad part is that when the Democratic Party talks about him, they completely remove the element of him being a socialist from him and talk about him purely as this civil rights icon, as if these things were somehow mutually exclusive of each other. They weren't.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. And then the details of the assassination. I mean, one thing, first of all, James Earl Ray, who killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which I guess there are some witnesses who say he was not the shooter, but he's the person that was ultimately arrested. I guess he was part of the Friends of Rhodesia Club, which was a group of people that supported the apartheid regime of what is now called Zimbabwe, right?
Zimbabwe. I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah. And that, I guess that, because the people of Zimbabwe, there was an anti-colonial uprising going on. There were various racists from around the world who were going to Rhodesia, or what is now Zimbabwe, to fight against the black majority that was being armed by the Soviet Union and China. And eventually they won in the 80s. They had the agreement, the Lancaster House Agreement, and ultimately that's, we have modern Zimbabwe. But I guess James Earl Ray was involved in the struggle to defend Rhodesia from the anti-colonial revolution. The other thing is that James Earl Ray also left the country very quickly. After the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was actually apprehended in France, which is very strange. Like, how did he get all the way to France? After multiple people saw him, shoot Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now there are some, I don't know exactly what went on, on that day. There are a couple, most of the witnesses agree that James Earl Ray was the shooter. There are a couple witnesses who didn't. James Bevel, the civil rights leader, James Bevel, who was a witness on the scene, he maintained, until the day he died, that it was not James Earl Ray that pulled the trigger. And he was, somebody who'd worked closely with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and had kind of a strange life. You can read about the life of James Bevel. It's a very bizarre story, but he maintained until his death that he was there. It was not James Earl Ray. There's also there are many people that have looked at that famous photo after the death of MLK and seen the crowd of people pointing, and many people have said, why are they not ducking in case there's another shot? Right. And many people have looked at that.
Yeah. I mean, because
yeah.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
So that's a fair question, I guess. But I and said, I mean, hey, this guy was just shot, from a rooftop, and and the people are not like covering their heads. Instead, they're all standing up and pointing. This is where the shot came from. Like, people have said that's a little suspicious, but I don't know about that. But at the same time, I mean, it very well could have been James Earl Ray, who was indeed the shooter. And he could have had some help getting to France. I mean, I don't know exactly what has happened, and that the details, I guess, that of the court proceedings where the King family sued the U.S. government, a lot of that is sealed. So they did receive a settlement from the American government that ruled there was complicity by the American government in the assassination. So that seems to indicate that on some level, and I would suspect that if there was anybody who was involved in it, it would have been the FBI. That's my suspicion, because the FBI's director was J. Edgar Hoover, and J. Edgar Hoover really hated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., had like a personal vendetta against Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, had sent him letters urging him to commit suicide, had leaked images of him. So I guess Bayard Rustin was one of MLK's close associates, and Bayard Rustin was kind of, he was very much the genius behind the civil rights movement, but he couldn't be a public face of it because he was gay and because he was a former member of the Communist Party. And Bayard Rustin and Martin Luther King Jr. shared a hotel room, and I guess there was a photograph from a hidden camera in the hotel room of MLK in the bathtub, with Bayard Rustin sitting on the toilet. They were having a conversation. And they released this photo to say that MLK was gay because he's in the bathtub naked with a gay guy sitting on the toilet, and they tried to use that to destroy MLK's reputation. And that was the FBI released that. And that there were all kinds of things they did to try and bring down King. And that, like I said, I worked with Ramsey Clark, with the International Action Center. That was who I began my political activism with. And, Ramsey Clark, I mean, he was the U.S. Attorney General, and he was constantly trying to control J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover wasn't listening to Lyndon Johnson, was certainly not beholden to Ramsey Clark, who was the head of the Department of Justice, and was not beholden to President Johnson. J. Edgar Hoover did whatever he wanted, and he had wiretap blackmail on everybody, and he had a personal vendetta against the civil rights movement, and he was a hard right anti-communist, whereas Lyndon Johnson and Ramsey Clark, they had been from that kind of the Cold War liberalism school. Their attitude at the time, Ramsey Clark eventually became an anti-imperialist, etc. But his attitude at the time was that the USA needed to deal with the issue of Jim Crow segregation and other things to maintain its credibility around the world, that they couldn't condemn the Soviet Union while they had Jim Crow back in the United States, and the civil rights movement was necessary. And that if you didn't have Martin Luther King Jr., you were going to have a much more radical movement that would possibly threaten the security of the United States. And Ramsey Clark, he was very much involved in releasing people from federal prison in big numbers. Releasing a lot of people from federal prison. He was involved in really emphasizing that crime is linked to economic problems.
Yes.
And that the Department of Justice and its efforts to end crime should work with the Great Society and the social programs that could make it so people are not in conditions that would drive them toward criminal behavior and such. And, Ramsey Clark was a great man in many, many ways. It was really an honor for me to be able to work with him, to go to his apartment, I had the job of delivering food to his apartment. That was one of the things I did, right? Is because, there were a lot of Syrians who really appreciated his word, and they were always, sending free food to the IAC office. And so he obviously didn't live there. And so I would take the food over to his home, and, doorman would meet me. I'd go upstairs and bring Ramsey Clark some food. And, you know, he was a really great man. And the FBI was not under his control. And the FBI, I mean, as far as he was concerned, the FBI killed Martin Luther King Jr. You know, as far as he was concerned. So, you know, I'm curious to see these new documents that have been released. And that has been kind of known around the world for years. But we'll see what these new documents say. So there you go.
Wow. It's amazing how, you know, even with JFK, we kind of accept that the CIA had him killed, or at the very least has something to do with having him killed. It's very weird when you think about it. Like a wing of the government killed the president of the United States, or in this case, a wing of the government killed Martin Luther King because of the impact that he was having in larger society. It's just wild. Like, I think the wild part is we accept it, if that makes sense. It's like you become so thoroughly comfortable with it that after a while, it's not astonishing. It just becomes normal information, which shouldn't become normal information because we're talking about an agency of the government murdering the head of the executive branch of that same government. And in this case, for Martin Luther King, I don't think it's any less shocking. Like, or at the very least, it shouldn't be any less shocking. The notion that one of the branches of government goes and murders or potentially has something to do with the murder and execution of a civil rights leader is outrageous. It's just outrageous. And I get all the pointing, but it depends on the gravity by which they saw Martin Luther King. Like, if you are imbuing this guy with a huge amount of integrity, a huge amount of oomph in regards to him being a person, that you love that guy. And I mean it in the sense of, you know, I love what this person is doing. This person is an icon, etc. And that person gets shot. Is your first thought of yourself, or is your first thought, hey, I saw the bullet come from that direction? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to it. That's why I don't want to immediately flag and say Jesse Jackson has something to do with King being killed because Jesse was pointing in the direction of the shooter, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I don't really know what happened, right? I mean, you know, like I said, James Bevel, who, you know, there's quite a lot of questions. You look at James Bevel's history, you know, I'm not saying he should necessarily be believed. He was the one who just insisted as an eyewitness that it was not James Earl Ray who pulled the trigger. But, you know, it's possible James Earl Ray did pull the trigger, but, you know, somebody helped him get out of the country and somebody put him up to it or something. I don't know exactly the details. And that's what I'm hoping these documents have. We can kind of get details, right? That's what I'm hoping for. But as far as, I mean, look, what was the name of the FBI program that they used to go after Martin Luther King Jr.? COINTELPRO. Right? COINTELPRO. And what does that stand for? Counterintelligence Program. It was Russiagate. That's what they were using to go after him. They maintained that the civil rights movement was a communist plot, that it came from Russia. That was the basis on which the FBI smeared his reputation, claimed he was gay, claimed he was a womanizer, urged him to commit suicide, and wiretapped him for years. That was the basis on which it was. It was because of the fact that Stalin had raised the issue of the oppression of Black people since the 1920s. And that, you know, the term civil rights was first used in relation to the Black struggle by the Civil Rights Congress. The Communist Party, after World War II, decided to rebrand their anti-racist work. And they found that. Yeah. They had originally talked about Black liberation or Negro liberation. That had been the language that they used. But after World War II, they launched what was called the Civil Rights Congress, which was their mass anti-racist organization that mainly focused on opposing the death penalty in the South, because in the South there were a lot of, you know, African Americans were sentenced to death in situations where there weren't, you know, there was not evidence, etc. And the Civil Rights Congress was formed by William L. Patterson, who was a leader of the Communist Party, and they began donating money and providing attorneys to Black men who were charged with capital offenses in the South. And the Civil Rights Congress became the civil rights became the buzzword that the Communist Party started using in its anti-racist work. What's interesting is Bella Abzug She was a member of Congress for many years, from like the 1970s and 80s in New York City, representing New York City. She was the lawyer for the Civil Rights Congress. Now, she never joined the Communist Party, but she was from a family that was kind of close to the Communist Party, and she was a young woman with a law degree, and she was an attorney paid by the Civil Rights Congress to represent Black men who were charged in the South. She represented a Willie McGee, which was a very famous case at the time, and she eventually became a member of the U.S. Congress. She became a well-known like feminist activist and such, and she was in Congress. She was a supporter of Israel. Unfortunately, she was a liberal Zionist, but she was anti-war on many issues, really opposed to the nuclear arms race, and really kind of iconic, speaking up in support of LGBT rights. And her background was with the Civil Rights Congress, and the Civil Rights Congress was also invited to the United Nations by the Soviet Union, which was a permanent, Security Council member. Yeah, and William L. Patterson gave the speech, "We Charge Genocide," to the United Nations, accusing the U.S. government of genocide against African Americans. So, that's the basis on which the FBI said, "Oh, this civil rights movement is just a communist plot. It's a communist conspiracy." And we consider this to be a foreign effort to destabilize the United States. What's interesting, the civil rights movement the modern civil rights movement started with the lynching of Emmett Till, right? The death of Emmett Till, right? A 15-year-old young man was accused of whistling at a white woman, was murdered. And what's interesting about that case is that so Stalin had just died, right? And Khrushchev was the new leader of the Soviet Union. And that the picture of Emmett Till's mutilated body was just shown all over the world by the Soviet Union, right? And they were just showing it to the whole world and saying, this is what America does to Black people. They say they're a country of freedom and democracy. Look at this. The mayor of Chicago, Mayor Daley, who was notoriously corrupt, was a Democrat. He spoke up about the case because Emmett Till's family lived in Chicago. And then the Kennedy family started, kind of encouraging people to protest. And there was kind of liberal mobilizations against Jim Crow segregation around the death of Emmett Till. And then it was the United Auto Workers Union that was, a huge labor union that had a lot of history, but they had kicked all the communists out, right? And the United Auto Workers Union and the Kennedy family went ahead and did the Montgomery bus boycott. And there was a feeling that if there wasn't some action from above around the issue of Jim Crow, that this was a ticking time bomb, and it was only a matter of time before much more radical forces, took the issue of Black oppression in the United States and the coming social explosion. There was going to be a social explosion around the issue of race in America. That was almost inevitable. They didn't want that explosion to be led by forces that would totally dismantle the system. I mean, they wanted it to be kind of controlled. And so it was really in 1954 that you started to have a civil rights movement from above. But prior to that, it had been communists that had organized around the civil rights issue. And you also had Black nationalism that was growing in the northern urban centers, in Detroit and in Pittsburgh and in New York City and other places. You had the Nation of Islam that was rising and had a lot of influence. There was also a guy named Father Divine. People kind of forget about Father Divine, but Father Divine was a Black pastor in Harlem who was an advocate of civil rights and was very sympathetic to the Soviet Union and had aligned himself with the Communist Party. And he also had a number of businesses in Harlem that he owned, and he was kind of a Black nationalist. And so Father Divine and the Nation of Islam were gaining influence, and on top of that, you had the death of Stalin, and Khrushchev came into power. Khrushchev kind of wanted to negotiate with the United States, and there were all kinds of circumstances that all led to the modern civil rights movement emerging. It's kind of interesting, but the FBI was always opposed to it, and it's interesting. There was a divide. I always talk about the Yankee and Cowboy War. There was a divide in the ruling class because a lot of the military brass are from the South, right? I mean, the U.S. military is disproportionately, the South, and the Southern military brass, the kind of the top generals and all of that tend to be Southern. They wanted nothing to do with the civil rights movement. They viewed it as, this is our Southern way of life. They're trying to mess with it, whatever. And the FBI also, had utter contempt for it. So there was kind of a division. The CIA the Ford Foundation, and a lot of the, the liberal think tanks. And I mentioned Riverside Church was one of the main supporters of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The Riverside Church is funded by the Rockefeller family. I mean, there's a big picture of John D. Rockefeller there. It's a Rockefeller outlet. And that kind of the liberal Eastern establishment, kind of the ultra rich, said, we need to do something about the race issue in the United States. And the FBI doesn't want to cooperate with this, and the military doesn't want to cooperate with this, but the Kennedy family, Mayor Daley in Chicago, and there was kind of a division in the ruling class. And it was through that division we got the big, explosion that happened. But yeah, there was a big division within the American deep state about the issue of Jim Crow. The FBI didn't want to do anything about it. They viewed any effort to kind of tamper with the structures of U.S. society as a communist plot, whereas the Kennedy family and the CIA and the Ford Foundation and a lot of liberals did want to alter things because they thought it would put the USA in a stronger position.
Yeah, you're right. That is Russiagate. Because you're right. They looked at it as a Soviet plot to undermine the United States, basically subversive elements in the United States pushed by the Soviet Union. And then Martin Luther King was this communist Manchurian candidate that was set off like a bomb in America to change American way of life. I guess my thing is, what happened? What changed? Like, there was that much energy in regards to, okay, society needs to change for whatever particular reason. In this case, it was just civil rights. I don't see that today. That energy doesn't seem to be there. It seems to be lost. And I'm not quite sure why.
Well, I think there's a couple factors to keep in mind. But I mean, the main thing is that there was a big adjustment that had to go on in the United States after World War II. Right? The USA at that point had the strongest economy in the world, in the 50s and 60s. Really,
Right.
It was in the 70s that stopped, being the case, and we saw the end of the post-World War II economic expansion. But coming out of World War II, the USA had the strongest economy in the world, and things had changed, and we still had a military draft where military service was kind of mandatory. We still had, legal segregation, and that there was kind of U.S. society needed to adjust, and there was a lot of confusion about that. And so in the context of a booming economy, which there was a booming economy in the late 1960s, I mean, the economy was very, very good. In the context of a booming economy, there was more optimism, and there was a willingness to adjust, and there was a lot of frustration. And that Brzezinski, the big anti-Russian, strategist, he talks about how the profile of a revolutionary around the world and in the Black community in America is a frustrated, newly educated person, and that there was a new number of people in the Black community who had gotten education for the first time, gotten college degrees in the first time, and were frustrated, right? And that the profile, and that this was the same around the world. Your Che Guevaras and your anti-colonial fighters tended to be people from the developing world who got education for the first time and were very frustrated with what they saw, what the education, made them aware of. And so the kind of the rise of Black nationalism and the rise of the civil rights movement and the Black liberation movement of the 60s was in the context of a booming economy, in the context of a wave of education and frustrated educated folks, frustrated intellectuals, getting involved and becoming politically active. That was kind of the context there. And we don't have the same energy now because the conditions are very different. Now, the economic conditions now are very bad. Right. And in the context of a very bad economy, in a context of a lot of demoralization and frustration, I do think there is a lot of political energy in the United States. I think people are very angry with the government, et cetera, but they're confused about where to go, and that our leaders have gotten better at kind of diffusing and manipulating dissent and pushing people in different confused directions. That, at one point, I talk about the late Cold War normal, how after the rise of Reagan, from like the early 80s up until the Bush years, there was kind of this normal in American politics of, they say, well, racism is bad, right? We agreed on that. America, we said, oh yes, racism is bad in a vague kind of way. But America was the greatest country in the world. We're number one, and we're number one because we have freedom capitalism is just the greatest system that ever existed, and capitalism and democracy are synonymous. And that was the way most Americans saw things. And the Republicans really believed that, and the Democrats believed that also, but they were nitpicky. They would raise some of the problems, with poverty, or some of the problems with different issues. But that was kind of the standard line in the United States. And the neocons were very key in setting that up, right? Irving Kristol and Leo Strauss, and forces that had been trained by them, that kind of assumed control of the Republican Party after Richard Nixon was ousted, after Richard Nixon was pushed out with the rise of Gerald Ford. That became the mainstream of conservatism in the United States. Leo Strauss, the intellectual, his favorite TV show was Gunsmoke. And the good guy wears a white hat and he's all good. He doesn't have a single flaw. The bad guy wears a black hat and he's all bad, not a single skill or redeeming quality, right? And Leo Strauss said, we need average people in America to see the world like an episode of Gunsmoke, right? And that was what Leo Strauss would tell his followers. Like, there's certain people like us that can understand it. We're the great intellectuals. He loved Plato and his concept of the philosopher kings. But he said average people need to understand the world like an episode of Gunsmoke. And that's Leo Strauss. And he was the guy who was the big brain that the Republican Party, was studying around. And Irving Kristol, who was also a follower of Leo Strauss and others. And they kind of reinvented American conservatism. And it's not a coincidence, I think, that we had two Republican presidents that actually took on a cowboy persona, right? Ronald Reagan was literally a cowboy Hollywood actor.
Yes,
Bush
he was
born in Connecticut, but he moved to Texas and he wore the cowboy hat and he was, was out on his ranch cutting brush and they both, he was going to smoke him out. And that they were playing up, it was trying to be, characters in a cowboy movie, and that the late Cold War normal. And I remember this. I was a kid in the 90s, and this was how politics was. There were certain things that everybody knew. And it was after the 1960s and 70s and all that confusion, we had come to this weird kind of, consensus that, yes, racism is bad, but America is number one. Democracy and capitalism are synonymous. And this is the greatest country in the world. And anyone who doesn't think that must be brainwashed, because everybody knows America is the greatest country in the world. It just is. That kind of thing. That was politics in America. And that didn't really fall apart until the Obama administration. Until 2008, you had the financial crisis, where all of a sudden living standards in the USA were dropping much more rapidly than they had been before. The living standards in the USA had been gradually declining since the mid 70s, but they really started dropping after the 2008 financial crisis. And all of a sudden, the late Cold War normal was over. And Obama came into office, and Obama was a student of Brzezinski. And really, it was the people who'd been ousted by the Reagan Revolution. It was the Carter. Carter also called himself, he said, I am a student of Zbigniew Brzezinski. And it was that the Cold War liberals, and the Brzezinski soft power faction that had been ousted by Reagan, they came back into power for the first time under Obama, because economic conditions had gotten to the point that they were able to kind of assume power. And that Eastern establishment, those Rockefeller liberals, the Ford Foundation, those kind of folks, whatever you want to call them, they were in power, and they had a new ally, which was the Silicon Valley tech monopolies and social media. I mean, Barack Obama, that's why if we had just had cable news, Barack Obama probably would never have been elected. It was social media, Twitter, Facebook, which were all very new, and the rise of Silicon Valley that kind of brought on this new wave of liberals, if you want to talk about it, woke or whatever. And that was to try and rescue the United States amid an economic crisis. That was the end of the late Cold War normal.
And that sapped the energy. I mean, I guess shouldn't that be the opposite though? At the point where you're having this kind of and I guess we did have Occupy Wall Street during Obama. It just didn't go anywhere.
Well, it was interesting because that's when I was very, very politically active. I was in college when the economy crashed, and then what was very sad was that they were still kind of following a Cold War script. And I remember that. You remember after the 2008 financial crisis, the cover of Newsweek said, we're all socialists now. And they were doing New York Times stories about the Brecht Forum, which was like this Center for Marxist Studies in New York. And that, my assessment is basically the government had determined that the communist groups were not a threat to anybody. I mean, they were not going to overthrow the system. But Obama and the Eastern establishment, the Rockefeller liberals, were hoping to, use the energy of the left to kind of push back against the Tea Party. So they gave a huge boost. And Michael Moore made his movie Capitalism, a Love Story, a lot of which was written by Richard Wolff, from what I understand. He wrote a lot of the film, and they just gave a big boost to the communist groups in the left. And they fell on their face. They had underestimated how weak those groups were. I was in one of those communist groups at the time. And I mean, these groups were so damaged by the Cold War, by infiltration, these groups they just couldn't do it. And Occupy Wall Street was almost take two, right? They had hoped they could use the regular left to be their foot soldiers against the Tea Party or whatever. And the communist groups were just so incompetent and just so they couldn't do it. They had nothing. And they had two big events called the U.S. Social Forum. One was in Detroit, one was in Georgia, and there was all kinds of foundation money. And they were hoping to just kind of use the traditional left to go out there, just go get them, Tiger, go do it. And the left just fell on their faces so badly. Occupy Wall Street was like take two, right? Occupy Wall Street was a lot of people from around the world. I was at the beginning of Occupy Wall Street. And it was a lot of people there was this intellectual, David Graeber, who had a lot of followers in Greece and Eastern Europe and places like that. And they brought in the color revolution people from around the world to do Occupy Wall Street because the communist groups were just incompetent. They couldn't do it. They just were so badly damaged by everything that had gone on. These are boomers with a lot of trauma, and being a communist in America is not exactly the easiest life to have, and especially not in the 80s and 90s when the communist movement globally is falling apart and all of that, and the communist groups just couldn't do it. And then Occupy Wall Street, and then after Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter kind of took on a new direction with things. And
linger on Occupy Wall Street for a bit, because at a certain point Obama started using the language from Occupy Wall Street. We're fighting the 1%, despite the fact that Citigroup picked his entire cabinet, or everybody that Citigroup picked ended up in Obama's administration. But he started using that language as a lightning rod. We're fighting the 1%. This is about the 1%, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know about the communist part. My knowledge of it went to them taking over the park in New York City. And then when the U.S. government got tired of it, the U.S. government started working with state government in order to get those people out. It's like, okay, you've accomplished your objective. I've been elected. Time for you to go. That was the way I remembered and understood it.
It was interesting because at the time Occupy Wall Street was happening, they dedicated the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C. And Barack Obama gave a speech and he said, if Martin Luther King were alive today, he'd be at Occupy Wall Street. And everyone was just so moved by it. At the same time, Barack Obama was having calls behind the scenes with the police departments of all the major cities about how to clear and beat up and arrest all the Occupy protesters. I mean, it was weird. The Democrats very much wanted Occupy to push back against the Tea Party, but at the same time, they wanted to control it. I mean, they didn't want it to be something and the main thing was to make sure it had no demands. And I was part of Occupy Wall Street, and I look back on Occupy Wall Street, and one of the biggest things was that there were a lot of people who were being paid to be there, who were full-time organizers, and they had this ultra democracy process. If you agree, you twinkle fingers. If you disagree, you down twinkle. All these hand signs and all of this. But certain people controlled it and got whatever they wanted. And there were certain foundation people that were there being paid, and they ran the whole thing. And one of the things they always insisted on was no demands. You can't ever have any demands. No demands. No demands. No demands. And the arguments they would make were absurd. And my organization, we were trying to push Occupy Wall Street to demand full employment. That was one of the things we pushed. And they said, well, then all the government has to do is give everyone a job, and then the revolution's over. And I'm thinking yeah, well, first of all, the government's not just going to give every person a job, right? That's going to be a big struggle. Second of all, if we were able to win that in the process of a mass movement, that would show people what they could win, and there'd be even bigger protests because people would get more involved. But, they had this, no demands, no demands, no demands. We can't have any demands. And we should have just viewed it as a recruiting opportunity. We should have never the mistake that my organization and the leftists made is we thought we were going to go down there, and through their democracy process, we would be able to get it to be in line with what we believed. That wasn't going to happen. Right. We should have just viewed it as somebody else's show. basically, and a recruiting opportunity. And we should have done the same thing with the Tea Party, right? Our attitude was Occupy Wall Street, good, and we're going to try to take it over because they're progressive. Tea Party, bad, racist, fascist, or whatever. We hate them. We should have just viewed both of them as a recruiting opportunity, right? Both of them are controlled by somebody else with lots of money, but there's people that are angry at the system there who have a piece of the puzzle, who have a piece of the understanding, and we can go and recruit them to anti-imperialism. That's how we should have viewed it. And there were a lot of people at the Tea Party who understood that, the wars were wrong. It was started by Ron Paul people that were very, very anti-war. They understood that the tax system is rigged in favor of the ultra-rich monopolies, that the Federal Reserve is a ripoff. They had one piece of the puzzle. People at Occupy Wall Street, they had another piece of the puzzle. They knew just money in politics, the 1%, police brutality. So they had one piece of the puzzle, and we should have just viewed both as a recruiting opportunity. We shouldn't have had the attitude of, we're going to take over Occupy Wall Street, because we couldn't have done that. And we shouldn't have had the attitude that, the Tea Party, they're awful people, they're racist, fascist. They're wrong too in their own way. They're confused, but they have a piece of the puzzle, and that's the beginning of a conversation.
To be fair, there was no way for you to know that going into it.
Right.
I mean, you have this upswell of legit anger at a system, and you go in thinking to yourself, okay, well, we're going to try to move this in a particular direction. That's not your fault. It's admirable that you guys were trying to do it. It's kind of hindsight where it's like, okay, these guys were being controlled. This wasn't what we thought it was. That's not your fault, though. That's not, that's a hindsight being 2020.
Well, a pivotal moment for me was the day Gaddafi died, October 20th, 2011. I was in the Occupy Wall Street camp the day Gaddafi was killed. There was a divide in the Occupy Wall Street camp that was a class divide. The trust fund kids, the professional activists, were being paid to be there. They all thought Gaddafi dying was a good thing. And it was working class people, black and white, libertarian, anarchist, black nationalist, others who said Gaddafi had been building an independent currency to, break Africa off the dollar and, have their own gold standard currency in Africa. They viewed Gaddafi as a great anti-imperialist, and it was working class people who supported Gaddafi, and it was rich professional activists who saw Occupy as part of the revolution that brought Gaddafi down. And it was a class division, and that's important to remember. It wasn't about left versus right. The professional left were on the wrong side. But a lot of working class people that were in the camp sympathized with Gaddafi, but the mainstream voices that have been boosted to be the voices of the movement, they didn't support Gaddafi. They saw Gaddafi, and they saw the revolution against Gaddafi as part of what their movement was about. And it was wild, right? They had people that were trying to overthrow the government of Iran, who came and spoke at Occupy. Oh, this is the same struggle, the Iranian government, the 1%, and it was, Occupy Wall Street was very much from above. But there were a lot of people there who were very much opposed to the system. So I don't regret participating, but, it's interesting to think about this. And how do you intervene when the people are in motion like that? How do you intervene? The main thing right now, taking it, to the time we live in, is that there is a false polarization. And this is a thing we made at our convention at the CPI gathering. It's not about woke versus MAGA, right? It really isn't. Everywhere you go in America, red states, blue states, rural, urban, conservative, liberal, wherever you go in America, people know, one, that our government is run by a group of ultra-rich people who don't care about us. Two, our living standards are going down. Three, all these wars around the world don't do a damn thing to make our lives better. They're not for us. Four, we're losing our freedoms very quickly. They're taking our freedoms away. Every corner of America you go to, people agree with that. And we need a polarization that's all the American people who know those things in their bones and want to change them against the ultra-rich monopolies that run the government, that run the military-industrial complex, that run the FBI and the policing agencies that are waging these wars. That's the polarization we need. The polarization we need is not woke versus MAGA, cultural, these kinds of divisions. And we need to repolarize, get beyond the false polarization, and get to the real polarization, which is what the overwhelming majority of the American people who are anti-imperialist in their bones at this point know against the imperialists and the big monopolies. That's the polarization that we need. And they're trying their hardest to make sure that doesn't happen. And the wave of political violence, I believe it's a psyop, right? You know, that they are trying to get woke people and MAGA people to shoot each other and kill each other. They want there to be a body count on both sides. So there's trauma, there's rage, and the people that are against the status quo never get together. And that is what needs to change. I want a repolarization to get over this false polarization, right? We need to be against the system, not against people who are also against the system, but in a different way than we are.
Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin, from your mouth to God's ears. Caleb Maupin, speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and author. He is, Caleb, I know you're with the Center for Political Innovation, but you are a creator of this, correct? Or one of the creators?
I am, yeah. We founded the organization. We've been having events around the country. We have people that are very active. You know, we've been distributing books about the Houthis. I wrote a book exposing Kamala Harris that, you know, I mean, we have been having actions during the elections. We unfurled a big banner of Trump and Kim Jong-un shaking hands. It said, "Only peace can make America great again." That was our intervention during the elections, and it was featured in the New Yorker magazine. And you know, we sponsored Rage Against the War Machine. We're involved in anything we can do to raise anti-imperialism among the American people, get the anti-imperialist message out there. The only future America is going to have is with the new economy that is rising around the world, the BRICS, et cetera. And we need to reorient the United States to be part of the new rising economy in the world, trading with countries on the basis of win-win and investing in people. Right? The source of all value in the world is human labor and human creativity. And we need a government that doesn't invest in destroying people with prisons and bombs and weapons, a government that invests in people, providing education, providing jobs, laying the foundations of an economy with infrastructure. We need a government that invests in people. Our slogan that we use everywhere is we need a government of action that fights for working families. That's the Center for Political Innovation.
Caleb, from your mouth to God's ears, you're fantastic, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Okay. You be safe.
Always a
Have
pleasure.
a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go from one great guest to another one. We are joined. I can see my man in the background, Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political analyst, cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI with the one and only Manila Chan. How you doing, Ted? You doing okay this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm not doing bad at all. I am super curious on your take on this. Considering that this is coming out of one of your Congress people, I'm not astonished by it, but I would call it deplorable, to put it mildly. And she has been getting a lot of heat for this, and she has doubled down on this. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, comes out with a bill saying we need to pull $500 million out of Israel. Effectively, these guys are committing a genocide. Why are we giving them all of this money? They have healthcare, they have education, they have all of this stuff. Why are we sending them billions of dollars? So she wanted to pull just only $500 million out of it. They only got 6 votes. 6 votes.
Yeah, because they get $4 billion a year normally. That's not even including their extra genocide allowance.
Yes. Thank you. Their extra genocide allowance. I'm glad you called it that, because that's exactly what it is. So one of your Congress people in New York had a certain point of view, voted against the bill, voted against it, and came out and said, Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment does nothing to cut offensive aid to Israel, nor in the flow of U.S. munitions being used in Gaza, or of course, I voted against it. And I love you. Of course I voted against it. Why is that an of course? They're saying, let's pull $500 billion or $500 million out of Israel as they committed genocide. And your response is, of course I voted against it. They didn't cut money to weapons. She says, what it does do is cut defensive Iron Dome capacities while allowing actual bombs killing Palestinians to continue. I've long stated that I do not believe that adding to the death count of innocent victims to this war is constructive to that end. That is a simple and clear difference of opinion that is long been established. I love the simple and clear difference. She says, I remain focused on cutting the flow of U.S. munitions that are being used to perpetuate a genocide in Gaza. How weird of a statement is that? How weird of a statement is that? I acknowledge that they are committing a genocide. However, I don't want the people who are committing the genocide to also be targeted. And so we need to protect the people who are committing a genocide. And so I'm voting against this bill. It's simple and clear. And the people went after her for it, making the point of saying, So I am a mass shooter, but I don't believe in mass shooting, but I believe in body armor for the mass shooter. Or you can even take it to Germany, right? It's like, well, I mean, I'm not for the Nazis committing a genocide, but I do think the Nazis should be protected as they commit their genocide. What a weird logic that she is running with. Or do you agree with her on this? This seems just bizarre to me.
No, of course I don't agree with her. When someone tells you, and especially a politician says that something is simple and clear, it's never simple or clear. And I mean, in general, if someone has to say what I'm saying is simple and clear, obviously it's not simple or clear. So look, there's a pretense in corporations and in government that there are discrete pots within, let's say, the Israeli government, that there's the defense weapons pot, and then there's the offensive weapons pot, and that those two things never commingle, and that it's possible to put money into the good pot, but not the bad pot. Now, okay, I don't generally like to compare governments to individuals the way that like conservatives do, like you have to balance your budget.
Right.
Why doesn't the, because that's not true. I mean, I can't mint money, the government can. But in this case, it really is like the governments can and do move funds around. We're seeing it right now with the big, beautiful bill. Funds are being moved out of one place into another, right? Mm-hmm. Happens every day. The Israeli government does the same thing. And also, it stands to reason, and this might be controversial, but if you are Israel and you are bombing the Palestinians in the occupied territories, and you're denying the small amount of, return fire from the Palestinian territories into Israel, yes, you are hurting the Palestinians. You are because the only thing the Palestinian resistance has, the only thing they've got going for them is weapons, right? They don't have very many weapons. They don't have enough weapons, and they're way out-armed and outclassed by the IDF. But they can fight back and kill the occasional Israeli. That is going to, of course, deaths are bad on both sides of the war. But that's probably one of the few things that may cause a shift in public opinion in Israel, is like, if they pay a price also from time to time, there will be a reduction in support. We know this from the Vietnam War. If the Vietnamese had never, we killed 2 million of them. They killed 48,000 of ours. They say 58,000, but 10,000 of those 58,000 died in car accidents. So you can't really attribute that to basically so 48,000 combat deaths, right? So obviously, if the part of the reason that the Vietnam War came to an end was because Americans saw their sons coming home in body bags, and it was like a problem for them. So obviously, in a war, if you help one side, it's sort of like in personal finance. If I say, hey, listen, I can't pay my rent this month, Jamal. Can you do me a solid and send me the money I can pay my rent? Well, and I say, and obviously that makes it easier for me to now pay my cable bill.
Right.
Okay. So yes, support is support. Lack of support is lack of support. And it's sophistry to say that, I want the Israelis protected. It's just like, your analogies are correct. It's sort of like, I don't want it'd be bad for death camp guards to fall off watchtowers and die. Yeah. So we're going to pay for like a protective thing for them, a little fence around that. Well, you're helping the infrastructure. You're helping them. And I'm going to go further here. Let's just say you decided to help them, not with weapons at all. Just say something else, like something to improve their international credit rating. You're contributing to the genocide. If you buy, Israeli hummus, you're contributing to the genocide. Anything that goes from you to Israel benefits the Israeli government and contributes to genocide. That's just economics. That's not emotional. And that, AOC, is simple and clear.
Yeah, I'd be more brutal. I don't care if a Nazi dies. I don't care if an Israeli soldier gets killed. Why would I care? They are
either.
literally out there murdering and starving people. I can show you videos of people who are literally dying on their feet of starvation. And AOC is making this argument like, ooh, it's impolite to not assist the people who are committing a genocide. That is outrageous. What a trash
I mean,
point
I
of view.
care when it's a liberal Israeli who's out in the streets protesting the war, protesting Netanyahu, trying to make change, and they get their apartment blown up. That sucks. It really
Few and
does.
far between. Few and far between.
Few and far between. Yeah.
I mean, because if you're looking at the polling of the people who agree with us, you're talking about like 80% of the population that says, yes, we are perfectly okay with exterminating every man, woman, child, dog, cat, baby that is effectively in Gaza. When they showed the rape that took place in the prison, where they raped the guy on camera,
Yeah.
and you got 60% of Israelis saying, we approve of that, we're okay with that.
Right.
And you got even people going to rescue some of those guys out of the prison. Okay, that's outrageous. That's a societal issue at that point. That's not like,
Yeah,
you know.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that I think when a government, particularly, a democracy, which Israel is, for some people.
Yeah, for some. Fair enough.
It's an apartheid democracy. But like for the people who are responsible for this regime, right? The concept of post-World War II collective guilt is relevant. Basically, the whole German people were deemed to be guilty, and they lived under a totalitarian dictatorship, right? Yes. Where it was very dangerous to oppose the state. Ask Sophie Scholl. Very dangerous. But still, it was expected that the German people had an ethical and moral responsibility to the world to take note of what their government was doing to the rest of Europe and to the Jews and other disadvantaged minorities, and to overthrow the government. I would argue that the Israeli government, a long time ago, passed that threshold where it is reasonable for the rest of the world to expect the Israeli people to rise up and violently overthrow the government of Israel, and in order to stop it what it's doing. I mean, and by the way, lest you were watching this as a Zionist and you think that that's unreasonable, Zionists are constantly arguing that the people of Palestine in the Gaza Strip ought to overthrow Hamas, and that they're all collectively guilty because they don't do that. Well, I'm going to argue that the people of Israel are in a far better position to overthrow their government than the people of Gaza are to overthrow the government of Hamas. I mean, first of all, is ordinary Israeli citizens are often armed to the teeth because they are conscripts and they have Uzis in their homes. That's not true about people in Gaza. Also, people in Israel have eaten lately. That's not true about the people of Gaza. It's hard to start a revolution when you can't eat or drink water. And so it's not to mention Hamas is not in power through any democratic means, right? I mean, they seized power in a violent coup. The Israeli government was elected repeatedly. And in fact, every time there's an election, it keeps moving further to the right and more genocidal. So, I mean, it's not unfair to say, overall, the majority of Israeli citizens, certainly not all, but the majority are repeatedly deciding to endorse these policies. And so it's not unreasonable to say, like, look, like they used to say in the 80s, check yourself, right? I mean, take care, clean up your business, clean up your government, get rid of them.
Just be clear, though, Hamas didn't steal power in a coup. They just never had another election after they won the election.
Well, there was a violent clash, right? I mean, they won an election, and then there was a attempt, and then they basically had a violent. There were gunfights between them and Fatah.
Yeah. Yes.
So I would call that a coup, right? It's as if January 6th had worked, right? And so they remained, like Trump had remained in power without, if he had remained in power for a second term, that he had not really won. That's what Hamas did.
But there was no way to know that
they didn't win the election.
Yeah, but there was no way to know that Fatah would have won that election.
Right. No, we don't know. But the point is, I think we can say by international standards, it was not transparent, free. It wasn't considered a legitimate election. I think you can fairly say that the people of Hamas, of Gaza, also haven't had an election in many, many, many years.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that part. Yeah.
So, that's just a fact. So, And think about like what a disproportionately high percentage of the population of Gaza is young, right? So most of those people, anyone under, I don't know what the voting age is in Gaza. Let's assume it's 18, right? But the vast majority of people who are in Gaza today don't remember an election.
No, I agree with that part. I take issue with the violent coup. A coup indicates that the other party would have won, and Fatah is hated at this point.
I think that's right. Right. But it's illegitimate to use, it's considered illegitimate to use violence in a democratic process, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
It would be like if Mayor Adams used violence to stop Mamdani from winning or something. It's like, well, he was going to lose. Right? Mamdani used violence to stop Adams. Adams was not going to win. Mamdani was going to win, but it's not legitimate.
Yeah, it's complicated, I suppose. AOC doubled down on this because, again, she was getting a lot of heat on this, where people were just
they're breathing down her neck. I mean, her district includes a whole ton, the biggest Orthodox Jewish community in the United States, right? I mean,
I don't care.
But
I don't care.
And by the way, she shouldn't care either because she's going to cruise to re-election without them. She doesn't need them.
Well, she comes back and she says, Google is free. If you're saying that I voted for military funding, you're lying, receipts attached. Okay, well, you did vote for military funding. Because if you're making the argument that, look, we're trying to cut $500 million from Israel, and you're voting, well, no, I don't want to do that. I want to maintain funding. Then you are given $500 million more dollars than would have been given if you would have voted for the amendment. But it gets worse. She says, drag me from my position all you want, but lying about them doesn't make you part of the left, quote unquote, meaning acting as if she is the bellwether for what the left is. And then she says, if you believe neo-Nazis are welcome and operating in good faith, you can have them. So it sounds like she's trying to say Marjorie Taylor Greene is a neo-Nazi and that she's putting the bill out for some other alternative reason. And because of that she doesn't want to vote for it by definition. I find that to be outrageous, considering Rashida Tlaib voted for this bill. Who's the other woman? I can't think of her name. Ilhan Omar voted for this. Meaning she is effectively saying that the people who are voting for this on some level are associated with neo-Nazis, even though
Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a neo-Nazi. I'm sorry.
No, she's not.
She's not. Honestly, she should sue AOC for libel. I would. That kind of rhetoric you just shouldn't tolerate. I mean, sorry. And
it's outrageous.
It is. I mean, look, AOC is this is the same chip that made her vote for Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, look, I get the whole point is like, look, she has pressure on her. She's got pressure from both sides. I have much less respect for someone without integrity when they really don't have any real good reason to do what they're doing. I mean, I don't really think any major Zionists are donating money to AOC anyway, right? She's just trying to get the heat off. And it's like, what's the point? Molly Ivins, dance with them that brung you. Like, it's the progressives who brought you. And by the way, these things are complicated, right? There's that whole faction of the Hasidim who are opposed to the state of Israel. And they're not insignificant. And that's part of the people who vote for her. So, I mean, the point is, she's very popular in her district. She's not going to be primaried out. She's not going to lose her seat. This is about sucking up to the leadership. This is about sucking up to Hakeem Jeffries, and those people. And also, I got to say what this is really about is in the background of the Mamdani situation. Which is
really? You think so?
Oh, that's what I think this is about. When I first read this story, I was like, oh, this is about Mamdani. I mean, basically, it's a five-alarm fire among the ruling classes in New York City. They think Mamdani is going to destroy the real estate industry. They destroy the stock market, ruin everything that makes the city great. And that's why all this money has gone to Adams. And hilariously, the more money goes to Adams, the worse he does. I mean, literally, Curtis Sliwa has radically surpassed. He's got twice the popularity now of Adams.
Wow.
I mean, And I mean, he's a marginal candidate in a Democratic city. So it's like, and again, I like Curtis Sliwa as a person. I've met him. I like him. I think he's a good person. I don't agree with his politics, but I think he means well. So, this is what she's seeing what's going on with Mamdani, and she's terrified of being attached to that. It's like, but listen, like it or not, you ran AOC as the Democratic Socialist, and like, well, you're it. Whether you like it or not, no one's going to believe otherwise, right? Sucking up to the right-wing Zionists is not going to get you anything. So you're just you're selling yourself out for nothing. That's stupid.
Oh, that's such a good point, Ted. I didn't even make the connection with Mamdani. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, sucking up to the leadership. Hakeem Jeffries is one of the weirdest, no charisma people that they could ever put into, like, he just is. Every time I say it, it's a complete turnoff to me. Like, it's like I have a hard time even watching him. It's so bizarre. He's like radioactive.
Yeah,
and,
like when you feel the presence of another human being in a room. Like, let's say you're in a room and like someone's behind you and you just sense it, even if they don't make a sound. I bet Hakeem Jeffries doesn't do that. I bet you wouldn't feel him there. He could walk. It's like the difference between being him in the room and not being in the room is zero.
See, I thought you were going to say the opposite, that you just feel like this cold, clammy sense of darkness or something.
There's any number of other politicians I would say that about. Hillary Clinton. But
no.
Yeah,
just darkness. This is Jeffries, and they asked him basically, hey, Mamdani is in your district, bro. How are you a Democrat? You're not backing the Democrat that won the primary.
What kind of message do you think it sends to voters in your party that you have still not endorsed the party nominee for mayor in your home city, in your home state?
We had a constructive and a candid and a community-centered meeting that lasted for over an hour on Friday, and we agreed at that meeting to reconvene upon his return back into the country.
What?
Wait,
what? You had a meeting and you are going to reconvene for another meeting when he gets back into the country? Dude,
what's he talking about?
They asked him point blank, what does it look like to the other constituents in the Democratic Party that you haven't basically endorsed the Democrat that is in your district? And that was his answer. I'll play it again for you. I mean, the answer makes no sense. It's like, yeah, we had a meeting, we talked, and we'll talk again when he gets back. Okay, what are you talking about for an hour? You either endorse God, you don't.
What kind of message do you think it sends to voters in your party that you have still not endorsed the nominee for mayor in your home city, in your home state?
We had a constructive and a candid, a community-centered meeting that lasted for over an hour on Friday, and we agreed at that meeting to reconvene upon his return.
I don't know what a community-centered meeting is, and I don't know.
No one knows what that means.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
But I mean, look, we're forced. This is like Kremlinology, right? We're forced to try to figure out what Izvestia means. What it's really saying about Comrade Brezhnev. And I think community-centered is code for Zionist. I think it's basically the hour meeting, and what he's saying is basically I'm negotiating with Mamdani.
That's what it sounds like.
And I'm telling him what he's going to have to do, what hoops he's going to have to jump through, how loud he's going to have to bark like a dog in order to get my endorsement. That's, I think, what that is, right? Don't you think?
What I honest to God hope is that Mamdani has those meetings, come back and says, this is what they wanted me to do, and I'm telling them to F off. And I would wager to you his polling is going to go through the roof.
I don't think at this point, I don't think that Jeffrey, it's like this. So much time has gone by now. If I'm Mamdani, I'm like, Zoman, if you're watching us here, right? Like, at this point, the endorsement doesn't do you any good. Who fucking cares? You needed it the day of the election, maybe 24 hours later, 48 on the outside. Now it's too late. The ship has sailed. Even if they endorse you, everyone's going to know that it came late. This is like, your Fresh Direct got delivered 2 weeks late, and now all the milk is spoiled. It's just not.
Right.
It's useless now. It's like, just don't don't even, you don't need it now. You're like, what, 80% in the polls? I mean, just fucking amble. Just don't be a pedophile. Don't do anything strange. Just fucking amble into Gracie Mansion. You're in. You're in.
But does
Flynn. And
doesn't even help.
His best friend is Andrew Cuomo. I just want to say.
Who? Oh, Hakeem Jeffries.
No, Mamdani's.
Oh,
Because,
really?
Oh yeah, I think so. In 1912, right? Theodore Roosevelt was a former president, and he was pissed off at Taft, who had been his mentor, for not being progressive enough. So out of spite, he ran as an independent, knowing he'd split the Republican vote, leading to Wilson's victory in 1912. That's what Cuomo's doing. Cuomo is pissed off at Adams and at the powers that be. He's running to split the anti-Mamdani vote. This is he knows he's not going to win, but he knows he doesn't. But he knows all the money is now with Adams. It shifted from the primary from him over to Adams. That's why he's running. This is a spite candidacy. It's like Curb Your Enthusiasm, the spite coffee shop. It's like that. It's it's exact. And so, and Cuomo really truly deserves a job in the Mamdani administration, and there may be one, because he helped him out. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a quid pro quo. I mean, truly. I mean, if you just look at the statistics, I mean, I think Mamdani's going to win no matter what these rich assholes do. But the point is, because he's so far ahead, but let's just say somehow you could light a fire under Adams. Well, Adams is the only, it would be, all the money's there, but not with Cuomo in the way. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So it's like
Cuomo said he's going to leave. Well, Cuomo said he's going to leave New York if Mamdani wins. He's like, I'm out of here. If Mamdani wins, I'm out.
Well, I think a lot of people are looking to leave New York, but not because of Mamdani, just because there's fucking excrement on every subway car.
Oh, that is grotesque. That is so disgusting. Oh, that's so bad. That's so bad. So you really think he would win this? So far, he is. I don't want to say
unless there's a scandal, right? Unless they find out something terrible about him. I mean, we already know everything terrible there is to know about Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo. So I think this race is baked in solid. And the irony is that the billionaire class, endorsing Adams has. I mean, think about the optics from really. I mean, Adams has a major problem, because it's like, okay, well, yeah, you need money to run a campaign, especially when you're at 9%. But his biggest problem is he's corrupt. And
right.
So he's like, it doesn't really make him not look corrupt to take money from, Michael Bloomberg and people like that, right? It just doesn't. It's not like he's a small donation populist dude, or he's passing the collection plate at the Zionist AME church. None of these things are true. So he can't win. There's no way.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. Corrupt man takes a huge amount of money. It just looks horrible, right?
Adams has no lane. The lane would have had to have been, I'm new and improved, and I'm like a man of the people somehow. Remember when I was in 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, I was a good guy. I'm still that good guy, and I'm out fighting for the vote. Eric Adams would have to be on the subway every day, shaking hands, talking to people.
He's not that guy.
Maybe.
Yeah, he's not that guy.
Probably not, but that's the only Hail Mary, right? There's no other way. He's not, and that's not his campaign. He's running the billionaire campaign, which is, and it's so hilarious, because the more he does that, the more people hate him. So that's not getting him anything. No one's like, oh, well, if Michael Bloomberg likes him,
Yeah.
After those racist Mamdani ads that Bloomberg funded, are you kidding me? They darkened his skin. They like the Time magazine did to OJ. They
increase his beard or something.
This is Mamdani's a dude who wore a suit into into the ocean, into the polar bear swim. He wore a suit. Okay, so he wears a suit all the time. I mean, he may sleep in a suit, and like so the one time he's in like I forget what that thing is called, the Indian.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
and one time like he was at a wedding or something, and he's photoed. So man, that Bloomberg had that picture all over the place, right? And by the way, good luck selling racism in New York. We're not scared of people who have funny foreign outfits.
right.
We see them all the
It's New
time.
York. It's New York.
That's my deli guy. I'm not scared of him.
Ted Rall, and God, Lord knows that man's wife is. I want to be just like I can see his wife on the campaign trail. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI with the one and only Manila Chan. Ted, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Good luck. Have a good rest of the show. See you later.
Oh, thanks, man. Be safe. All right. I see my other man in the background, Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri Lascaris, there we are. He is a lawyer, journalist, activist, Montreal, Quebec. He is also host of Reason to Resist. And I would add this other part. In 2020, ran for the leadership of the Green Party in Canada. How you doing, Dimitri? You doing okay this morning?
Well, we have some troubling news this morning. The news actually dates from Monday.
Yeah.
You may have already mentioned this. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but Laith Marouf has been detained by the Lebanese army.
Yes,
so
I have mentioned it. It was the first thing I opened up the show with. And I'm talking with the gentleman he was with at 10 o'clock, actually, to give a rundown of what was taking place. Yeah, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
That's outrageous. We still don't know what's going on with him. We still don't know where he is. They lost contact with him at 1 a.m. Being a journalist is no longer defense.
Yeah, I've been through, with Laith, and the gentleman I think you're going to interview must be Hadi.
Yes.
Hadi Kotate.
Yes.
We passed through many checkpoints in the south of Lebanon over the last 22 months, and it's always a dicey proposition, but this never happened before. I'm not a Lebanese national either.
Yeah.
And sometimes they let me in, and sometimes they don't let me into South Lebanon, but always they just let us, drive away.
Describe this checkpoint, because I don't have a mental image of this. I've been through checkpoints in certain parts of Bethlehem, but that was like on a bus. That wasn't like just 2 or 3 people. And even in Egypt, when I've gone through checkpoints, I didn't think anything of it. This is stupid American, just kind of sitting in the back while my drivers talk to the guards.
Yeah.
I paid no attention to it at all. What is it like in Lebanon, though? I mean, this is.
Well, to get anywhere in South Lebanon, on the beaten path, shall we say, and not off the beaten path. You can get into South Lebanon, and once we did that, because we couldn't get through a checkpoint, we did it by crossing a river in an SUV. But
are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, it was a shallow river. It's the Litani, which flows through South Lebanon.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the demarcation point of the area that Israel has been trying to conquer for a long time, the Litani River. So there are points at which you can drive across it. But that only happened once. On all other occasions, we either encountered a checkpoint that wasn't manned by the Lebanese army, but usually they are manned and they're permanent. They're like concrete structures there, and there's a soldier standing in a hut, by the road, and they always speak in Arabic, so I don't understand what they're saying. But generally, we have to produce our passports or a national identity card, which I don't have because I'm not Lebanese. And there's some discussion, and sometimes you can sit there and wait for 5 minutes. Sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes you can sit there and wait for 45 minutes and get questioned extensively. But I've never been involved in or know a journalist personally who was taken away by the Lebanese army. So this is new. I'm sure it may well have happened before. I'm just not aware of it. But, Laith is, as I've discussed with him, operating in a very dangerous environment because he is an outspoken critic, not only of the Lebanese government led by Joseph Aoun, but he's also an outspoken critic, outspoken, of the Gulf autocracies that exercise enormous influence over the Lebanese government, have a lot of leverage over the Lebanese government.
Yes.
And you know, as you know, comrade, Laith doesn't pull his punches.
He freaks me out. He freaks me out. I mean, I like some of those reporting or the reporting that he's done where he's been shot at by the Israelis. The areas to which he operates in and comes back with reporting on it, that stuff feels very dicey. And you can tell he's in danger. And it freaks me out. It royally freaks me out.
Yeah.
I just hope he's okay. And I hope this is a documents issue as opposed to a political issue, if that makes sense.
Well, taking him away for a few days, I think we're now into a political issue. Hard to imagine that this is just a documents issue. I mean, they were aware of whatever documents issue they found. They were aware of it already. so this has been for a whole bunch of reasons. I could say that with confidence that the Lebanese authorities have known exactly what Laith's immigration status is for months, and this never happened to him. So
Laith is a Syrian citizen. He's not Lebanese.
He's a Syrian and Canadian citizen, and that's actually where I came to know Laith. He lived in Montreal for many years.
I see.
And in Palestinian solidarity circles, we crossed paths, became friends. And he's also a citizen of, he's of Palestinian origin, but he's a citizen of Syria and Canada. And frankly, Canada's government has a very, shall we say, a dicey relationship with Laith. So
Yes.
I've urged Canadians to call their member of parliament and ask them to intervene. But, you know, I frankly have little confidence that the Canadian government is going to help here.
God, man, I don't like hearing this.
Yeah.
Laith has been a really good friend of the show. As you said, he has been outspoken. He has been fearless in his journalistic pursuits. Oh, God. And yeah, Heidi thought that he was going to get arrested also. And when I spoke to him a little bit earlier, he said, this is no longer an issue, or at the very least, they told him they're not looking for him. And so the catch becomes, okay, so were they waiting for Laith? Were they looking for Laith?
Yeah. Well, Heidi works for Press TV, which is the Iranian state broadcaster.
Right.
And, you know, which is obviously a backer of Hezbollah. And the Lebanese government is under intense pressure from the U.S. government. I don't know if Laith had an opportunity to tell you this last time he was on your program, but they're basically telling the U.S. emissary to Lebanon is telling the Lebanese government led by Joseph Aoun that if you don't disarm Hezbollah, then we are going to basically have sick our Syrian dogs on you.
Yeah.
And you're just going to become an appendage of this new Wahhabi entity in Syria. And, you know, so Hadi not only works for the Iranian state broadcaster, but he's also, his journalism for years has been sympathetic to the resistance in Lebanon, right? So, you know, he too may well be in the crosshairs. Who knows?
Well, he did say that apparently he checked and they weren't looking for him. Fortunately, thankfully.
Right.
But yeah, you can imagine that's unnerving. You stop at a checkpoint, they'd say, hey, we need you to get out the car and come with us.
Yeah.
And it's like, where am I going? You'll see when you get there.
Yeah, it's
like
been
that type of
3 days, you know.
Yeah, and it's been days. That's the other part. Like, it's one thing if, you know, you go to an office, you fill out a form and you're out. This has been days. I know nothing about the Lebanese, I guess, judicial system. I don't know what they're holding him on. Like, I don't even know if Hadi knows at this point. I know Hadi says he's continuously checking just to try to get information. But I don't know who could even get information in a system like this. Like, I don't know how this works at all by any stretch of the imagination, especially since it's not the police, it's the military that decided to do it, which makes it even grayer. Like, I don't even know if the military is functioning under any kind of, let's say, domestic political law. Yeah, I don't know, man. When I found out about it, my mom sent me somebody put a notice under one of my videos. And my mom hit me up and said, hey, have you seen this? And I immediately sent him a message, didn't get a response. I sent Heidi a message, got a response back from him. And I asked him to come on to basically give a breakdown of what happened. And I suspect it's the way he explained it before. They pulled into a checkpoint. They pulled him out of the car. They said, gave him some reason for why they're detaining him. And at that point, he was disappeared. And you know what freaks me out about this? It puts me in mind of Gonzalo Lira. And that's the thing that scares the shit out of me. Because I remember when, you know, Gonzalo Lira was the one in Ukraine, and they kept going after him. Like, they kept arresting him over and over again. Thankfully, this is the first time that Laith got arrested like this. But it's just what's in my mind, because it's the thing I remember as a journalist in a foreign country getting arrested. And it's the link that I have in my mind. It's the thing that's freaking me out. It's giving me a bit of anxiety. But Hadi will give, I guess, a breakdown of what he knows up to this point. And if he knows anything else, hopefully he will be out soon.
And Canadians out there watching, again, you know, we need to pressure the Canadian government to intervene here and figure out what even though it may be a challenge to get the Canadian government to act. If you're listening and you're Canadian, please call your MP and tell them, you know, the Canadian government needs to make immediate inquiries with Lebanese authorities about Laith's whereabouts.
You said he has a challenging relationship with the Canadian authorities.
Mm-hmm. He was a when he was in Montreal until a few years ago. He was an expert in broadcasting law. So in this country, we have something called the CRTC, which regulates the media and televisions and so forth. And he represented various. He basically ran an NGO that was responsible for ensuring that the Canadian broadcasting regulatory system was fair and equitable in its coverage of Indigenous groups, other racial groups, and marginalized groups. And he did great work in that regard, but he was also quite a harsh critic of the Canadian government and political and business elites in this country in the course of doing that work. But more than anything, it was his advocacy for Palestinians. He was involved in a huge controversy here in Montreal when Netanyahu came to speak at one of the universities in Montreal. And he was basically forced, this is about 20 years ago now, Netanyahu was forced to cancel the speech, and there was a huge protest and on bordering upon riots when Netanyahu was scheduled to speak. So Laith was one of the leaders in the attempts, successful attempts to ensure that Netanyahu was not allowed to flap his gums to an audience at a Canadian university. And ever since then, he's been in the crosshairs of the Zionist lobby in this country. He's like one of the most detested people by the Canadian Zionist, arena. So
he's been doing God's work. It's like Hitler, a Nazi hates you. Okay, put that on my gravestone, right? It's like Nazis hate
said it better. It's exactly what it is. The Nazis hate Laith. Yes.
Yeah, the Nazis hate me. I want that on my gravestone. The Nazis hate my guts. Period. That's
badge of honor, man. Badge of honor.
Yeah, that's the thing I want to be known for, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. It's just shocking. It's like you talk to somebody for so long, and then all of a sudden something like this happens, and it puts you in mind of the territory that you're operating in. I mean, this is nowhere near comparable, but it was weird to me that the U.S. government took action in order to get rid of my network. That's bizarre. The government is like this faceless entity from the way that we look at that stuff. It's just this thing behind the scenes. And yet this thing behind the scenes is moving to do something to stop you from doing something that you're doing. It's not like, the cops will stop you from robbing a store. You're just doing your job. And you get this entity. I remember I believe I was going to Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. I was on vacation. And I saw Blinken come out and say, we are passing sanctions against the networks of RT and Sputnik, the parent companies. And I'm sitting there like, whoa, what the hell does that mean? And I hit my boss. I'm like, hey, what does this mean? He was like, we have no idea. And then at that point, the lawyers were very surly about the whole thing. Like, hey, man, you got to talk to your lawyers. It's like, dude, we're talking to our lawyers, but that is pretty vague. What does it mean? And it took a while. Like, I think RT went up in smoke almost immediately. Our boss had always told us that they would have to come and physically pull the cord out of the socket before he shuts down. And that's effectively what happened. I mean, we did our show, I believe it was September 15th. And they said, by the way, this is the last show. And that was it. It just stopped. That is nowhere near.
That was a huge deal. Yeah, people.
It's
I was
weird.
shocked that happened.
It's just weird. Like it's very bizarre. It feels like something is out to get you.
Yeah.
And that is not even like something is out to physically get you and throw you in a cage in the way that is taking place for Laith. It's just very strange when you have this overarching thing that is preying in the background, trying to find something in which to trip you up on or catch you on. That is not the same thing as losing your physical freedom, especially when you don't know what is taking place. But God, man, it's an awkward, strange feeling. So
Yeah.
I just hope he's doing well. You did a video and you said we are run by monsters. And you was like, this is my rant for today. And I'm feeling that rant. Dig into that just a little bit for the audience. We're run by monsters. And I love the term that you use, monsters, because I use that term myself. I think these people are maniacs. Explain why you said that. And I know you're talking from a Canadian context, but it's not just Canada.
Well, there are a whole range of reasons why I said it, but the immediate one that caused me, by the way, I periodically do these things. They're called rants of the week, where I just have to unload. Yeah. I find them very cathartic. And so I don't know how educational they are, but it allows me to breathe and relax afterwards. I calm down. So I got it.
I was feeling it. I tell you that much.
So, the immediate cause, there's so many reasons why I believe that with every fiber of my being that we're ruled by monsters, is the fact that we are now seeing people dropping dead in the streets of the Gaza Strip. Yes. And they're still sending weapons to Israel. It has been almost 2 years, Jamaral, 2 years of the most public genocide in human history. And every manner of atrocity has been inflicted by Israel, this Western-backed rabid attack dog, on the civilian population of Gaza. They put 17 rounds of sanctions on the Russians and still have not imposed a meaningful sanction on even the 2 men who have been indicted by the International Criminal Court. Not even those 2 have been sanctioned. Only a small number of states have sanctioned Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and they used the sanctions like toilet paper. And since then, Israel's behavior has become worse. So if you are it is unquestionably a Nazi regime, Israel. But every one of its crimes is being enabled by the monsters who rule us.
Yes.
Every one of them. And they don't care. They don't care how many children, how many emaciated skeletal babies we see. Nothing will cause these people to exercise the enormous leverage they have over this pipsqueak of an evil country. Nothing will cause them to do that. And in the meantime, they're lecturing the whole world about international law, human rights, and democracy in places like Russia and Iran and China and North Korea. I don't know what else to say other than that these people themselves have to be Nazis in order to facilitate and enable. It's not simply that they're allowing it to happen. They're making it happen. Right. They're providing the weapons. They're providing the intelligence. They provide the military fuel. They provide economic aid. They provide the political cover. They provide the legal protection in places like the ICC. They're doing everything they can to enable this genocide. How are they not monsters? How can we not see that they are monsters? And if they succeed, if they get away with it, this is the point I really tried to make in that rant. Because for me, the Palestinian people, the fact that they're humans is in and of itself enough reason to be completely outraged by what is happening, doing whatever we can to stop this.
Right.
Citizens of Western countries that are enabling it. But if that doesn't move you, the fact that they're humans, consider what these monsters are going to do if they get away with this to us and to our kids and to the little that remains of democracy in our countries. We see it slipping away now. Already they're taking away, like when they shut down, RT and Sputnik. They're taking away our freedom of the press. They're taking away our right to protest. They're throwing people in jail for criticizing, a genocidal regime and its backers. We will descend rapidly, and I fear, and I hope to hell I'm wrong, that we will descend rapidly into outright fascism if we allow them to get away with this genocide.
You know, one of the things I tell my mom, and she hates it when I say it, but it is true, that human life doesn't matter in international politics. That like when they're looking at what something they want to accomplish, it's just an objective. And the people who are going to be at the worst end of that just don't matter. I haven't seen any evidence that said that the people do matter. I mean, if there's a political reason where it's like, oh my God, Russia is killing people in mass. They kill one person after firing 500 drones. It's like, okay, is that really mass? Like you said, like 500 drones, multiple Kim Jong missiles, multiple all of this stuff, and you hit one person, and you think to yourself, that is hard to do, even if you were trying to do it. And yet Israel is out there. You're having people who are literally starving to death on their feet. I can show you video after video of people starving to death. A guy walking away with his hands raised, getting shot in the back. I could show you the BBC, I think it was BBC broadcast, where they were pointing out that the people were waving white flags and Israel opened fire and opened up tank rounds on the population that was starving, trying to get food. And this is every day after day after day. And then they would say, I know, man, but those Russians killed that one person. It's like, okay.
Unbelievable. They think we're gonna fall for this shtick now. They're gonna lecture us about human decency. I mean, it's almost like they're mocking us when they invoke international law, human rights, and democracy. It's like really they're giving us the middle finger. Do they still believe that anybody in the population buys this crap anymore after what we witnessed? You know, it's just.
I said before, I don't believe there's international law. I don't believe it exists. I just don't. I don't know how. And I've had people make this argument and say, well, dude, there has to be some kind of benchmark. And it's like, yeah, but if you have countries flagrantly violating that benchmark constantly, how can you say it exists? At least that's the way I see it.
Yeah. It's gone now. You know, I think it actually did have what I would call a persuasive effect on a number of governments around the world for a while, for much of the post-World War II period. It wasn't like a break on their behavior. It was a mitigating factor. They would try to behave in ways that they could plausibly claim complied with international law. So it moderated their behavior. Some states didn't give a damn, of course. Israel never gave a damn. U.S. government never gave a damn. But there were states around the world that actually tried to model their behavior in accordance with international law, as imperfectly as they did it. Now, no one, I think, after what we've seen, Jamarl, is even moderating their behavior. We've just completely nullified any positive impact that international law was having and these international tribunals were having. I mean, what they've done to the ICC in particular, right? You know, Karim Khan goes in there. He did the absolute bare minimum, the chief prosecutor. He waited months and months, was dotting his I's and crossing his T's, and finally he indicts 2 people. Finally, under immense pressure, and they then destroyed Karim Khan. The man, they come after him with, you know, I don't know whether these sexual harassment allegations are well-founded or not, but I think we can say confidently, whatever the merits of the allegations may be against Karim Khan, the reason that they were dredged up now was because the Israelis and the Americans have decided to destroy Karim Khan and the institution of the ICC itself. The sanctions they have imposed, according to people inside the ICC, have ground its work to a halt, not just in case of Israel, but all the investigations they're doing. Like, they can't function with these punishing sanctions on them. And now we have the story of this guy who was acting on behalf of the Israeli government, this British Israeli lawyer, Kaufman, I believe was his name, telling Karim Khan that if you indict anybody else, you will be destroyed. You know, and where is Karim Khan today? He's out of the position, at least temporarily. So, I think international law is dead as a doornail. I'm sad to say.
Yeah, in fact, they went after his bank account. They apparently told him, Europeans, by the way, the criminal court is not for effectively whites. It's for those targets in Africa. Like, you don't supposed to be going after people who we care about. Basically, it's the rules-based order type thing. And even the thing on Putin, where they were like, we're going after Putin because Putin is taking kids out of a war zone. It's like, okay, are you serious right now? This is what you're really using this for? Like, it has been politicized and politicized to such a degree. It's like, okay, so you're going to go after African dictators. Great. But the U.S. invaded a country, got 1 million people killed, and the president was bragging about torturing people. no, we can't do that. Like meaning big states do what they want. And I don't know how you have a government or this kind of how you can have international law when there's no Leviathan in order to push one way or the other. I don't know. It just didn't make sense to me. I'm curious on something else. Do you think Israel's going to get away with this?
No, I don't. I think we're seeing the impacts now on Israel of its Nazi behavior.
Explain.
The economy is being pummeled. There are people fleeing the country. I get reports every day. I have family and colleagues in Cyprus, for example. Israelis are flooding into Cyprus, buying up everything in sight. I've covered this on my own program. They're coming into Greece, where I have a second home. I'm encountering Israelis everywhere in Greece. So they're fleeing the country. I think there was a report that just came out recently done by Israeli economists. I was watching somebody who had actually read the report, himself an economist, and he said that according to them, if they lose 10% of the most talented people in the Israeli tech sector, that is going to basically be a death knell for Israel. Those people, they're already they're already challenged to find, before the genocide began, they were challenged to find sufficient qualified people to operate, the tech companies in the country, which are an essential part of the economy, but also, the tech companies are intimately involved in the military-industrial complex in Israel and ensuring that the military does the evil things that it does. So they were saying, these economists, Israeli economists, if just 10% of these people leave, we're done. I think there is a high probability at this stage that you're going to see the most mobile people in the Israeli economy, who include, of course, the most talented tech workers, flee the country in droves, because it's been demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israel can't keep its people safe. I mean, if you have the option of living in New York City, you're like a highly capable tech worker, or living in a country that's in a constant state of war, a tiny little country, and that can now be basically flattened or at least severely damaged by Iran, whose people are extremely angry with you. The whole region is seething with anger with you. You have now this so-called reformed terrorist in charge in Damascus. There are atrocities happening right across the border, all around you. Cisco or some other part of California in Silicon Valley, and make a high income. Are you really going to stay there? A lot of people, I think, are going to choose the more secure option, or you could go live in Western Europe. A lot of the people there have this option. They are highly, highly mobile. So there's that. There's the fact that there is absolutely no, there's no sympathy for Israel anymore in the global South at all. Not that there was much. We just had the positive development of 12 states at part of the Hague Group, all from the global South, coming together and collectively deciding on July 16th that they're going to impose an arms embargo on Israel. They are going to ensure that Israeli war criminals who come into their jurisdiction are held accountable in their domestic courts. They are going to prevent military fuel and other dual-use goods from being transported through their countries to Israel. And they've opened up their commitment, these 12 states, for others to join. There were actually 30 states at this summit that was held, right, which including China, Indonesia, a huge country. So I think the momentum is growing for collective action against Israel. Israel is extremely vulnerable to sanctions, unlike Russia. Israel is like I said, it's a pipsqueak of a country. It has very little in the way of natural resources. It's very difficult to defend. Russia had this gigantic economy, incredible resources at its disposal, and a highly educated population. They managed to weather that storm. And they did so, by the way, with the support of the world's largest economy, that of the People's Republic of China, right? Israel doesn't, it doesn't have those resources. You cut off or diminish aid from the West, it's done. It is done like dinner. And I think smart people in Israel understand this, how vulnerable it is now. So the international contempt for what Israel has done and how it conducts itself, the outrage that is being experienced around the world is in and of itself a reason why Israel will eventually collapse. And then you have the fact that Israel is clearly militarily vulnerable. And, they couldn't even defeat Ansar Allah. So this is a country that's in serious, serious trouble.
Well, they have the ability to shoot dangerous babies in the back.
They're really good.
But, yeah, they're extraordinarily proficient at that, right? But when it comes to, it's like, have you ever been hit by a man in anger? It's like you're dealing with a peer, and it's not just a peer, a country that can actually destroy you, wallop you in real terms. Okay, well, that's different, right? I mean, they immediately backed down and went back to attacking Hezbollah, who would not fire a shot in anger, bombing Syria, who would not fire a shot in anger, and murdering women and children in Gaza. And of course, there are gangs of dogs in the West Bank murdering people and killing people. So it's like the moment they went up against an actual country, it's almost as if, hey man, we're so awesome. Look how we shoot these babies in the back. Let's go after Iran. And it's like, don't do it. Don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to do it again anyway. That's the wild part. Meaning everything that you just said is true. That you're talking about a damaged economy. You're talking about a country that realizes now that they're vulnerable in a way that they never realized that they were vulnerable. I mean, for God's sake, they were living in sewers and bunkers for nearly the entirety of that war. Because every time Iran fired a shot, it usually hit its target in some particular fashion. And that is with the US, Britain, Saudi Arabia, Jordan. That's with all of these countries helping, trying to knock down Iranian missiles. And even still, they were getting through over and over and over and over again. And so you have a country that is now vulnerable, but that vulnerability doesn't seem to affect their point of view in regard to the direction that they're trying to go. They are going to go back after Iran. I will bet my left testicle on it, as people would say.
Yeah. Well, the interesting, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But the interesting thing is, when they entered into the ceasefire, they basically begged, Trump to.
Yes.
They said that they viewed this as being what they called the Lebanon model, right? Which is, we'll enter into a ceasefire, the other side will respect it, and we will bomb the crap out of them whenever we feel like it. And there's not a damn thing they're going to do to retaliate against us. So that was what, 4 weeks ago?
Good luck with that.
Yeah, they have not struck Iran once militarily since then. And we don't even know of any kind of terrorist attack within Iran since then that was orchestrated by the Mossad or CIA or whoever. And so right now they seem to be trapped between fear and hubris. They really, really, really want to destroy Iran. And eventually they're going to find a way to resume. And I just woke up this morning, read a press report that Trump is threatening to bomb Iran again. Yes. I haven't seen the threat, but I saw a headline, if they revive their nuclear program.
It's on social media. Iran, Arghachi, I think is the foreign minister of Iran. He was on Bret Baier. I hate these interviews when Iran does interviews. It grates against my American sensibilities. Americans don't talk in the way that Iranians do. And so you would never have a situation where an American would try to justify their nuclear program. We're a sovereign country, we can do whatever we want. It would just be that. And every word that would drip out of that politician's mouth would be, we're a sovereign country, we do what we want. That is not the way Iran discusses these matters. I don't even think he mentioned sovereignty. He mentioned national pride. And it's like, it has nothing to do with pride. You're a sovereign country, own it. But that's besides the point. He effectively pointed out, we are not stopping our nuclear program. Full stop. We're not doing it. This is our right. This is now a matter of national pride. And I think if he really went into it, what he would say is, the moment that we stop doing the program because you guys are threatening us, well, you can get us to do anything. The moment I give you my lunch money, well, I mean, what else can you take from me at that point, right? I've already given you the benefit of showing you that I would give you my lunch money out of fear. And so Iran can't accept this premise of, okay, we'll stop this, because the very next thing behind it will be, and we need your missile program to, be diminished also. The threat can always compel behavior if you indeed accept the first threat. So they were very clear, we're not stopping our program. Trump comes back with the Twitter or social media or True Social. We will bomb you again if we need to.
Good luck with that, Donald. I actually, when I was in Tehran last month for the Soviet Media Festival, we had, there were 7 or 8 of us, including Max Blumenthal, some other independent journalists who were invited to go to the research reactor in Tehran and meet with the spokesperson of the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization. And we were given a tour of the facility, first of all. And it was explained to us, we were shown all the impressive things they were doing with this research reactor to develop essential medical products. And then, in our meeting, it was explained to us by the spokesperson for the Atomic Energy Agency that even according to the IAEA, a significant portion of a country's, to have a properly balanced energy system should come from nuclear energy. I think it was something like 15 or somewhere between 15 and 20% of the electricity generation should come from nuclear energy. According to the IAEA, Iran, it doesn't have infinite resources of oil. And by the way, Western governments have done everything possible to destroy its ability to actually extract and refine oil through the sanctions. So it is actually, there are legitimate reasons for every country. If you're going to say only countries that, don't have abundant oil can have nuclear energy, well, what is the United States doing with nuclear energy? The United States has huge reserves of oil. Producer of oil today, if I'm not mistaken, is certainly one of the largest oil producers in the world.
Yeah.
So why they not only have nuclear energies for civilian purposes, the United States has the second largest nuclear arsenal in the world and is the only country to have ever used it. So unfortunately, I agree with your assessment about, Iranian government officials doing interviews with the Western media. They tend to leave a bad taste in my mouth.
I hate it, man.
They just, like you said, they don't deal with the press the way they're not attack dogs.
Possession interview with Tucker Carlson was horrible. People can disagree with me on it. I thought it went horribly awry. Argacci, in his conversation with Bret Baier was like, "You're supporting the axis of resistance." Now, to be fair, he actually was strong on that point. He's like, "Yeah, we're not changing that. Why? I mean, they're freedom fighters. It's like Israel is murdering all of these people. What? Are you out of your mind right now? Is that really the conversation you're having with me?" But it's not like Lavrov. It's not like interviewing Lavrov. Lavrov is really good. Right. He punches when he needs to punch. He's sarcastic when he needs to be sarcastic.
He's the best in the business, man. He's the best in the business. He can take on anybody.
So good. Yeah. That's not the way they do interviews, though. And it always aggravates me. And then it's like, we're trying to have a moral war. And it's like, okay, dude.
It's funny, the unofficial, spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry. I'm not suggesting there's any kind of like a control being exercised here, but is Mohammad Marandi, the professor of University of Tehran. I think he's clearly an independent actor because he was just asked actually about that interview with Tucker Carlson that the Iranian president did, and he was quite critical of the Iranian president's performance. So he's an independent actor. I think that's clear. But man, he's done an extraordinary job for the Iranian people of doing what the government should be able to do, and that is to make the case for the Iranian people. He just and there ain't nobody, Piers Morgan, nobody can touch Mohammad Marandi. It's amazing to watch,
Marandi is good. Marandi is really good. Yeah, Marandi is really good. He has been a fantastic voice to explain what is taking place, why it's taking place. He is feisty when he needs to be, like when he's going after Piers Morgan and the two are going at each other. No, he's good. He's really good. He's been a really good friend of the show. He's been very nice in coming on and explaining that stuff. So, Dimitri, man, I've appreciated this interview. I really have. And from your mouth to God's ears, I hope there is punishment for what Israel is doing. I hope they do fall apart. But, one of the things that Bret Baier said, he was like, do you think it's right that they're saying that Israel shouldn't exist? And it's like, dude, for one, no country has a right to exist. Like, that's not God-given, right? You make your rights. Two, if there was a right, you relinquished it at the point where you're committing a genocide. Yeah. Like, you've lost me. Like, how can you really make that argument we should exist after killing all of these people in the most horrific and crude ways?
Yeah,
I hope you're right.
And by the way, if it were up to me, I never would have allowed Germany to reunify. In fact, they should have broken that country into 100 damn pieces, as far as I'm concerned, after what it did during the Second World War. The German people should consider them very, very fortunate to have a state. Well, you have people who look like hardcore Nazis right now agitating once again against Russia. They don't have the military capability of doing anything yet, but they have a big mouth. They have a very big mouth. Yeah. And so, Dimitri, thank you for this, man. I always appreciate these conversations. I deeply appreciate you joining me, Dimitri Lascaris. He is a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. 2020, Dimitri ran for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada, and he is host of Reason to Resist. Check him out. We were just talking earlier about, what do you call it, a weekly rant.
That's what you call it.
Rant of the week.
Rant of the week. You have a good one, man. You be safe, okay?
Take care, man.
Thank
See you.
you. Bye-bye. All right. Let's see, what time is it? I am waiting on Heidi to join. Hopefully he will join. We have one chat. What is this one chat? Sir Bikes a lot. When the United States criticizes the Soviets will reply, but capitalism kills Black people for no reason. This is kind of what Caleb Maupin was making an argument. It's humiliating, radically hypocritical, where the rest of the world knows exactly what you're doing, where you have this kind of apartheid state with the Klan running around murdering Black people left and right, and yet you're lecturing other countries on human rights. It's like, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Let's see, Natalie Williams, great show again, Jamal. Well, thank you, Natalie, I appreciate it. U.S. Navy vet, me too. What is this? Dana, sorry, I can be more of help. I just don't want to misrepresent statement. Bad cookies. Okay, I don't know what the statement was. Charles G. Disenchanted with American neocon policy. I'm disenchanted with America in general, man. I got to be honest with you. I'm very disenchanted with America in general. What have we done good? What have we done good? Just answer me that. What have we done good? And I mean this not in a vague way. I mean this in, what have we done good as a beneficial representative of humanity? I don't mean space race that was done for reasons of war and getting ahead of the Soviets. What country have we defended for good ends? I'm unaware. What have we done as moral, just, ethical actors in the world? And this time you're making an argument for other countries. I'm talking about us. I live in America. You know, we're supposed to be the shining city on a hill. We're supposed to be different. We're going around lecturing other countries around the world as if we have some kind of moral edge. I'm asking, what is a moral edge? What is a moral edge? I don't know. He said cancer. Yes. Brian James. Yes. We've been cancer. And if you think of all of the wars that have been taking place around the globe, if you think of the agitations that have been taking place around the globe, who has their finger in all of them? We do. And when you're looking at countries that are sane and rational, you're looking at China and, dare I say, Russia, who, yes, got involved in a war, but they got in a war that we would have gotten into because we would have wanted to defend our borders. We were willing to end the world when it came down to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So again, my point of view and my orientation of the way I look at the world comes from the U.S., for the better and for the worse. We gave the world everything you use now. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Dude, America's been around for like 200 years or what, 400 years. Math, science, all of those things were there before. If you want to say you gave the world cell phones, okay, well, we don't make cell phones here. We make them in China. Blackmail Italian Russian mob in New York to turn against, what is it? Haiti kicked France, but ish, yes and no. I mean, if you remember the double indignity, Haiti had to end up paying to not be slaves. And so Haiti has been paying money to France all of this time, all of these years. They'll have the dignity of not being slaves. Hey, we're sorry that we got our freedom. Let us pay you for us having to take our freedom at the barrel of a gun. It's just outrageous. Just completely outrageous. They gave the war McDonald's and Coke. Yes, and we have been fatter for it ever since. We have. I mean, I'm not asking this question frivolously. I'm asking this question in earnest terms. What positive, ethical, good, and righteous thing have we done recently? Let me go to my guests. I'm joined with Haiti. Haiti, how do I pronounce your last name?
It's Hadi Hafid. I'm gonna
Hadi.
I'm sorry, I was a bit late. I'm gonna be joining in
No, man, you're
like
perfectly
2
fine.
minutes. Yes.
No, you're perfectly fine. I thank you for joining me. I'm not going to keep you long. I just wanted to,
okay.
I guess it's a basic question. What happened?
Yes.
Dimitri mentioned it. I mentioned it when I first started the show. Like I said, Laith has been a really good friend of the show. And so obviously I don't want to see any harm to come to him by any stretch of the imagination. This freaks me out.
Okay.
Give us a rundown of what took place.
What happened is exactly what we do each day. Usually we go to South Lebanon to cover what's happening, and sometimes we go in the morning, sometimes we go in the afternoon. Usually the Israelis were doing lots of attacks and drone attacks during the daytime. So usually we used to go to South Lebanon during daytime. Now, this time we went a bit late because of the Israelis were attacking the border villages at night. They were also doing incursions at night. They were sneaking to the villages, terrorizing the people, putting, for example, they were implanting some bombs and later exploding them just to make people terrorized. And we went to exact location of the last incursion in Maisel Jabal. Actually, we didn't reach there. We were going there. We reached the entrance of this border village, which is actually it's like a peninsula inside the occupied Palestine. If you know what I mean, it's very remote village that it needs like one long road to reach. So we went there, me and Laith, as usual. And when we reached a certain location, we noticed that, of course, there was nobody on the roads, and people were they were also basically waiting to see if the Israelis also were gonna do anything tonight, because the day before they entered the village and they bombed, as I said, they bombed the two excavators that were helping people to remove the rubble of the destroyed houses so they might be able to rebuild their houses that were demolished in the last war. What resulted in this was that the security of the village saw us. They simply came and asked us about who we are, and we gave, of course, I have my ID, my permits, my journal, my press card, and also Laith has his ID and everything. But later, the Lebanese army sent the intelligence guys to check on us. Also, this happens. This is not something unusual in a war zone. It's a war zone. So we will expect these things to happen. But the bad thing was that this time they were very acting like, I don't know what to say, but usually it's solved by, they know who I am, they know who Laith is. So we're not new to the border area. We're not like, we're not new to journalism in South Lebanon. I'm a war correspondent. Laith has been there since the day of the war. So usually this doesn't happen this way. Now this time they asked for all our papers. Of course, we had all of them, but one missing paper, which was the paper that allows foreigners to enter South Lebanon. Now, Laith used to have one of these papers, but because of the routines in Lebanon that usually makes you needing to change, the papers and to go through long processes. This time he didn't have his his paper permit with him. But this is what I mentioned. I don't know if you read the update that we just published.
Oh,
this is what we mentioned, that we just published an update like 1 hour ago, I think. Usually when let's say that you're there, you don't have a permit, but you have all the identification cards. This is like an administrative thing, it needs you to just to go to a certain place and issue a permit, and that's it. This is the entire problem can be solved through a very simple administrative process. And let's say at the maximum, they would tell you like, you should not repeat it, you should, or let's say they might ask you to like sign some papers regarding not repeating it, or regarding that you're caught without a permit somewhere. It happens. By the way, this happened to many journalists in South Lebanon, but not for people like, for example, like Laith, who are all the time there. Usually it happens for example, for a visiting journalist who came to Lebanon and he didn't have the permit, he might be caught and interrogated, but he will be released usually in less than 1 day. This is where the thing becomes a bit weird, because usually you need 3 hours to 4 hours at maximum to issue a new permit, and they will ask you for some information. You're gonna give the information. You're gonna prove that you're a journalist. They're gonna check your background, and they're gonna give you a new permit and tell you like, either they will tell you welcome to South Lebanon, either they will tell you don't repeat it. But that's it. What happened was that they released me on the spot because basically I don't need the permit and I had my papers. And they told me like to follow the SUV to another military base. Laith was in that SUV, and they told me that they're gonna like just check on his things and do like the needed. They're gonna fix his situation, and then he's gonna be released. So I went there. I waited. I remember waiting for like 2 to 3 hours at least on the entrance before the guys came to me and told me like, you can't just keep sitting on the entrance of the military base. You should go somewhere, or you can't wait here. And I don't want to bother you with the lots of details, but we just received like a new update. This is why I ask you if you told your audience about it or
I
not.
hadn't seen the update. I was live, so I didn't get the chance to see the new update.
Okay. So we were told that the problem with Laith was solved in the first place. Then when he went to the other place to check only to issue the permit, another problem showed up. After the problem was fixed earlier, they told us that everything is fine. Then suddenly it turned out that everything is not fine, and now they have to do another interrogation. The other interrogation included searching your phone, latest phone, and confiscating his all his electronic devices. Also, as I told you, usually this is not done as a regular process. You don't do this to everyone. You don't end up having everyone's phone checked when you catch them without a permit somewhere. But we are journalists. The journalists usually are somehow they have a special
protection.
It's not only about protection. Also, it's about like because you always go with your electronic devices. You always have your laptop, your audio, and 2 to 3 cameras, some microphones. Sometimes you'll have more than this, like I do usually in my car. So for example, when you find someone who has lots of electronic equipments, usually you stop him. You search for what are these electronic equipments. But when you have a journalist, it's very regular or normal to have him with lots of equipments with him. So they searched Laith's phone and they started investigating things. And that's what's happening right now. We are waiting. They didn't allow him to contact anyone, but we noticed that his phone was opened, and and when we sent messages, the messages were received, but Laith was not replying. So this is how we know that they are using his phone. they are searching it. They are searching his contacts and all of this. And I just talked to someone from the army who disclosed to me that Laith might not be released today, but they are hoping that if everything went fine, he might be released soon, and we are waiting for the investigation. Basically, to be honest, this means nothing. This means that, he's just telling me that until now there is nothing on him, and I know that there is nothing on him. We know that we didn't do anything. They didn't catch us committing a crime. They catched us having, asking the people about which road to take on the border, so we don't end up in the, heading towards the Israeli enemy. So we are waiting right now to see what's happening, but at the same time, I will use this opportunity on your show, and thank you for having me today, because I will call all our friends and latest friends who also follow your program to share about Laith's case and ask for his release. Why? Because right now, to be honest, I believe that only some political pressure and people's pressure can, some public pressure on social media can help pressuring the guys here in Lebanon to think that we shouldn't keep him more than this, because it might be extended.
Where should they send it? Like, if they wanted to send something on social media, if they wanted to call, where would they do it? Just the Lebanese?
Just people, of course, they can tag us on X, and we can reshare it on our on Free Palestine TV.
Okay.
But let them just mention it on social media and make it reach the bigger audience. So this case won't be a silent case. The police always love to have silent cases where no one is bothering them. So this is
just
this is what I want to say.
Is this the police or is this the military?
Well, right now, Laith is being held by the intelligence and the headquarters of the intelligence of the military intelligence in Lebanon. The headquarters of the military. Now, this is a bit complicated for someone from outside Lebanon, but I'm gonna try to explain it. Why? Because technically, and if we're speaking about the Lebanese law, the mukhabarat, the intelligence, military intelligence, don't have the right to stop someone. They are military intelligence.
Right.
They're not. I don't know how to say it. They are not executive force. They are. They are the military intelligence. So technically, in Lebanon, this means that if we're talking about law, they do not have the right to stop people and interrogate them, because they are not related to courts, and they do not follow also the law of courts. So instead of this meaning that they don't have the right to stop people and interrogate them and detain them, they use it in the other side. They detain people and deny them of all the rights that usually you have in court. Like, for example, if you are stopped by the police, you will have the right to call your family to tell them. You'll have the right sometimes to keep your cell phone. You will have, if there is nothing related to your cell phone, you might have the right to keep it. You will have the right to call your lawyer, at least, to have a lawyer with you. Right now, we are struggling to make lawyers, or to find a lawyer who have the connection or the let's say also the required things to enter the place where Laith is staying, is being detained, and the headquarters, because the military intelligence refused to accept lawyers if they were investigating with someone, even if he was a journalist.
Wow.
So yeah, this is why it's frustrating. We're not afraid because Laith has nothing to hide. You know, Laith publishes every time we go to South Lebanon. We do a video about the visit, and we publish our it's his opinion about what's happening, about opposing the genocide in Gaza, about being against any kind of collaboration from any part in Lebanon, about supporting the resistance and supporting everyone who opposes the Israeli genocide is obvious. Everyone knows this. There is nothing to hide. But what's really concerning is the fact that we were not able to reach him. His family also is not here. He has very basically, he has no one, because if only family can visit him. Well, his family is not here. But right now, even when he's staying, even if his family were here, they can't visit him because he's denied the visitation. And also, he can't access social media. He can't access his phone. He can't talk to a lawyer. He can't give anyone a phone call. So this is a problem. And to be honest, in Lebanon, it's debatable, and each time this debate returns to sometimes being circulated in the public. This is not something legal. This is not something. This was something that the Lebanese people are right now, or let's say, it has been normalized. So now it's normalized that you have the intelligence, the military intelligence, who can do this. But this is not, even the Lebanese law do not state a situation where the military intelligence can stop someone and deny him all his legal rights regarding being stopped by a police or by any force that is related to a court. So right now, if they want to charge him of anything, they're gonna deliver him to the police to charge him, because they don't have the authority to charge or to issue charge. I don't know if this is a bit clear, but this is why we are struggling with Laith's case, because we need to talk to him. We need to make sure that he's okay. We need to know what's his situation, and he's a journalist. This is, to be honest, you might understand if they were doing this to someone who has committed some kind of a crime or something, but not for a journalist who usually journalists must not be punished for their work, basically. He was on his job. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for this, man. Great breakdown. And yes, you make perfectly clear sense. It's just a little disconcerting. That's all. It's just worrying.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just worrying. I will be looking for updates.
I hope we published an update on FPTV on X account. You can read it, and we called people to share a hashtag on social media, release Laith Marouf, to pressure the people here to know that this is not going to be a silent case. And also, we are thinking of other ways to pressure the authorities here to at least to give us access to Laith, to check on him, to know what's his case, and also to be informed about what's happening, what's the problem, why you're detaining him without charges. He's being detained without charges. To be honest, to be very clear, and everyone should know, there is nothing that can lead to his detention. Even, as I was very sincere, and I told you, we lacked one paper permit, but this is there is no way that this permit will lead to the fact that you're gonna spend nights in detention, or you're gonna be interrogated, or you're gonna go to the Ministry of Defense to be interrogated. This is something something big. You don't have this. Not everyone who doesn't have some kind of paper is sent to the Ministry of Defense to be interrogated. I don't know. Do you still have like a couple of minutes?
Yeah, go.
I would say I didn't want to to like say something to look like I'm issuing some accusations, but to be honest, usually you can think that these kinds of tactics are used by the authorities to make people like Laith, or people not necessarily like Laith, people who have who dare to speak, who dare to say things as they are, who are courageous in their coverage, and who go to places. Laith explicitly he critiques the UNIFIL forces. He criticizes the UNIFIL forces and their actions in Lebanon. And he sometimes, when the Lebanese army doesn't do his job, he says that the Lebanese army did not do its job. The Israelis came and the Lebanese army was there and didn't react, and the Israelis came and did so and so, and the Lebanese army did not act. He doesn't. He says the truth as it is. So usually, it's it might be logical to think that when you go to the maximum when we take things to the maximum with someone, and it can be just solved with a phone call or with some small procedure. It's usually a kind of pressure against this person, to pressure his nerves, to make him to terrorize. It's a political pressure. Yes. This is you have the right to think of this. I'm not saying that. I'm not gonna make accusations now, and also Laith is still being held. I'm not gonna start any kind of problems with the government right now.
It was my first thought.
Everyone has the right to think of this, because as someone mentioned on Twitter, like, you have the Israelis attacking you from the south, and Daesh and ISIS and the HTS terrorists attacking you from the east, and what do? You detain Laith Marouf. This is what you do.
Right.
So this is hilarious. Everyone know that this is not something logical to do, and it can be done without all of this, dark situation where you cut everyone from dealing with him. You could do all of this investigation, by the way, without even Laith knowing about it. This is how the intelligence forces usually do these investigations. They can start a case against him and track him and track his cell phone and everything, even without him knowing this. They can run a complete check on him, a security check, without detaining him. So this detainment is, I think we have the right to think that this is only to make him more, to try to make him afraid of speaking things and intimidated. And I know Laith, I know he won't be intimidated by any of these things. And we have discussed this a lot of times when we discussed even more than this. We said, like, okay, the work we're doing might result in many things. One of them is being attacked, being held, detained. Also, you have something that is a lot more dangerous and also more possible, which is to be struck by some drones or by some machine gun fire when we are on the borders, hundreds of meters away from the Israelis. We think that we always put this as a possibility, but we don't like it when it happens from the side of the Lebanese army. You always think that the Israelis will be attacking you, not the Lebanese army. This is why it's a bit disappointing for us, and we hope that this problem will be solved soon, and Laith does not spend more time in detention. And but we are not going to only to hope. We're gonna keep raising our voice and acting, and we might actually do a press conference tomorrow if he wasn't released, to pressure the government to release him or to give any kind of information. If he was charged of anything, let us know. If he wasn't charged, well, don't detain him. That's it. This is a very basic white or what do you call it? A black or white situation. You know, it's like either he is being charged of something, so let us know about it, and okay, that's it. If he wasn't charged, and and the officers confirmed today, 2 officers confirmed for me that Laith is not charged of anything. This afternoon they confirmed. They called me and they told me that Laith is not charged of anything. But of course, this is not official. These are, you know, it's so. If he wasn't charged of anything, why are you detaining him? This is our basic question, and we have the right to ask it. And we hope that the government will respond to it. And also, we hope that if right now the people who are hearing your show and following us, they also have the right to ask it. Like if Laith was charged of anything, if he did anything wrong that deserves to be detained, tell us. If he didn't do anything,
tell us.
They just release him. And this is this is it.
Heidi, thank you for this. Honestly, man, I really appreciate it. I really
You're
do.
welcome, and Jamal. And I hope that I'm glad that you know, we had this chance to talk, but I hope that we have another opportunity to talk in a better situation, and to also have our friend Laith with us.
I just want him out. Yeah, I just want him out. Yeah, this freaks me out. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay?
Thank you, and for your audience.
Thank you. Yeah, this freaks me out. This freaks me out. Military intelligence snatching somebody is just weird. It's just very weird. All right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Hopefully Laith is out by then. Fingers crossed. And like you said, retweet him, hit him up, let him know. Any little bit of pressure helps, right? You all have a good one. Be safe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Signing off.